Call an ambulance, quick, hurry. My husband, Caleb, who always made me angry, suddenly collapsed on the floor, sweating heavily. The paramedics came right away. They checked Caleb quickly and put him on a stretcher. Then they turned to me and asked, "You're his wife, right? Can you come with us to the hospital?" Caleb looked at me with desperate eyes as they carried him away. I stared back at him. "No, I won't," I said, without hesitation. "What?" Caleb's voice sounded like he couldn't believe it. "Are you leaving me here?" "So?" I replied. "I'm not coming." "What do you mean?" "Just take care of the rest," I said, turning away. "Wait, Lydia, wait," Caleb called out. I pulled something from my pocket that I'd been carrying for days. The moment Caleb saw it, his face went even whiter. "How dare you treat me like a servant all these years? This is my revenge. I will never forgive you." Let me explain a bit about myself. My name is Lydia. I'm 36 years old and a housewife. I live in a rented apartment with my husband, Caleb. I met Caleb through a coworker when I used to work full-time. My coworker liked to invite me to parties, but I'm more of an introvert who prefers watching movies or cooking alone. I didn't like big groups and often turned down the invites. One time, my coworker invited me to a barbecue. I said no at first, but he insisted, so I went. The party had a lot of people, and one of them was Caleb, who later became my husband. I was sitting by myself, having a drink, when my coworker brought Caleb over. He thought Caleb and I might get along because we had similar interests. At first, I was surprised, but Caleb was friendly and funny. He was tan and seemed like the outdoorsy type. As we talked, I found we had more in common than I thought. We started talking more, and it clicked right away. We exchanged phone numbers and made plans to meet again. We went on dates and hung out a lot. Eventually, Caleb proposed, and we got married. Before we got married, Caleb was always kind to me, even though he was more outgoing and liked to be outside. After marriage, things didn't change much at first, but over the years, some things started to bother me. I quit my job to become a housewife because Caleb wanted me to, but he often made sarcastic comments about it. For example, one time when I wasn't feeling well and dinner was late. "I'm home, Lydia, why isn't dinner ready?" "Sorry, I was sick and had to rest. Can you take a bath first?" "You're a housewife, you should at least have dinner ready," Caleb said, never showing any concern for my health. It made me feel really sad. Another time, I mentioned a reunion in my hometown. "Caleb, there's a reunion coming up. Can I go once I finish my chores?" "Do whatever you want. Being a stay-at-home wife is great. You know, I envy you, Lydia. You get to spend your husband's money. He's usually nice, carrying my purse and bringing me flowers after work, but sometimes, he's rude." I even suggested getting a part-time job, thinking maybe Caleb wanted me to work, but he insisted I stay at home, so I remained a full-time housewife. One day, I got an unexpected call from one of Caleb's relatives. I picked up the phone, feeling uneasy. The relative was panicking on the other end of the line. "Caleb's mother has collapsed." I froze, shocked by the news. The relative explained that she had gone to visit my mother-in-law earlier and found her lying in the yard. She called an ambulance, which took my mother-in-law to the hospital. I quickly rushed to get ready and ran out of the house. When I arrived at the hospital, they told me that my mother-in-law's condition was still unstable. As we were talking, Caleb arrived, out of breath. We went to the hospital room to see my mother-in-law, who was lying in bed, hooked up to various tubes. It was hard to watch. "Mom," Caleb called, but she didn't respond. Caleb stayed at the hospital all day, and I went home to get some things for our stay. Over time, my mother-in-law started recovering and was able to sit up on her own, but she still needed help with most things. "I'm glad she can sit up now. I hope she'll be able to walk again with physical therapy," I said to Caleb. When my mother-in-law's discharge date was approaching, I told Caleb, we should start preparing for her to come home. Then, Caleb said something that confused me. "Oh, by the way, we're leaving this house next week. You better start packing." I was confused. Caleb seemed frustrated with me, like he didn't like my reaction. "We don't need this house. We're moving in with my mom." "Wait, does that mean we're going to live with my mother-in-law after she leaves the hospital?" I never heard anything about that. "What? Did you decide to move in without talking to me? Have you already canceled the lease for this place?" When I said that, Caleb got even more irritated. "Of course, I canceled the lease. It's the right thing for us as a family, to live together and help my mom. Don't tell me you don't want to live with her. I'm the one who works, so I won't take any complaints." He said this and walked away with a firm step. I couldn't believe Caleb was being so strict about this. He had cancelled the lease without even discussing it with me. Now, I had no choice but to move. I knew he was worried about his mom, but this was too much. I sighed deeply. A few days later, I found myself living with my mother-in-law. I had never cared for anyone before, so everything was new to me. I spent most of my days feeding, bathing, and helping her use the bathroom. She didn't want my help and hardly spoke to me. When I tried to talk to her, she would hide in bed and say she was in pain. Before she got sick, my relationship with her wasn't bad. We'd sometimes share snacks from the department store. Maybe she was too weak to care for anyone else. Caleb, on the other hand, rarely came home after work. He would go out for drinks and come back in the morning. If he stayed home, he'd find some excuse to leave, and when he was home, he'd just play video games in his room. One day, I decided to talk to him while he was gaming. "I know you're busy with work and drinking with your colleagues, but can't you help me take care of your mom when you're home, or at least help with the housework?" He didn't even look up from his game. "Why are you being so naive? Housework and caregiving are your job. I'm tired from working all day." "Well, I'm almost out of coffee. Can you make me some? And clean this room, okay? Also, take these clothes to the dry cleaner. I need them by Wednesday." Caleb gave orders and threw his clothes at me. This time, I couldn't hold back and snapped. "That's enough. I've been doing everything, housework and taking care of your mom, for the past month without a break. Why can't you help a little?" Caleb slammed his game controller onto the desk, stood up, and said angrily, "How dare you talk to me like that? Who do you think is providing for you? If you have a problem, then get out, take your stuff and leave." I hesitated, then said, "I feel bad for my mom. She's going to be left all alone with no one to care for her." I couldn't say anything else. It was true that I didn't have much money saved, and I couldn't leave my mother-in-law, who couldn't do anything for herself. I held back my feelings, picked up his clothes, and left the room. After 6 months of this difficult life, my mother-in-law passed away suddenly. One morning, I went to check on her as usual, but she wasn't breathing. I called an ambulance, but it was too late. Caleb was crying, saying, "I don't know why." But I couldn't cry. I felt cold seeing Caleb cry so easily. I thought, "You didn't do anything to help her." And when I realized I didn't have to care for her anymore, I felt a strange sense of relief. I felt guilty for feeling that way. Time passed quickly. After the wake and funeral, I suddenly realized 2 weeks had passed since my mother-in-law's death. It was time to sort through her things. After Caleb left for work, I started cleaning her room. I packed her favorite clothes and accessories into boxes. It didn't take long since there wasn't much. Then, I opened a cabinet next to her bed. There wasn't much inside, but on the bottom shelf was a large can. I remembered it. It was a can of assorted sweets I had given her when she was still healthy. I wondered why the can was there. I opened it, and inside, I found a letter. It was addressed to me, starting with "Dear Lydia." I quickly opened the envelope and found a message written in trembling handwriting. "Lydia, I'm sorry for making you take care of me. I was ashamed of forcing you to work for me every day. I was also ashamed of my son, Caleb. I know how badly he treated you. Lydia, you should leave him and live your life the way you want." My mother-in-law knew everything. She knew how selfish her son was and how it was hurting me. At the end of the letter, she wrote, "I'm glad I could spend the last days of my life with you, Lydia. Thank you." That was when I cried for the first time since she passed away. It felt like everything I had been holding in finally came out. I cried until I had no more tears left, and then I made up my mind. I was going to divorce my husband. 10 days later, after finding the letter, my husband was still treating me like a servant. "Lydia, I'm missing a sock. Where is it? And take my car to the car wash today. You've got nothing else to do, right?" He was going golfing with his colleagues today. I couldn't believe it. Today was our wedding anniversary, and he had completely forgotten. "I don't even care about it anymore. What will you do while I'm golfing? You can't just sit around. You have to make dinner, clean my room, and clean the bathroom. You have a lot to do." His arrogance left me speechless. "Hey, you hear me? Bring me my sock and a jacket. Hurry up or I'll be late." At that moment, Caleb suddenly collapsed on the floor, clutching his stomach. He was sweating in pain. He told me to call an ambulance, sounding like he was trying to make it as dramatic as possible. I froze. shocked by what was happening, and he yelled, "Hurry up, you're useless, call an ambulance." When Caleb yelled at me, I felt strangely calm. I called 911, and within minutes, an ambulance arrived with paramedics. The paramedics quickly checked Caleb's condition and placed him on a stretcher. As they moved him, one of them asked, "You're his wife, right? Will you come with us to the hospital?" Caleb looked at me with pleading eyes, but I looked right back at him and said firmly, "No, I will not." "What?" Caleb sounded shocked, as if he couldn't believe what I was saying. "This man is a stranger. I'm not coming, please take care of the rest." Then, I pulled out something from my pocket, the divorce papers I had been carrying for days. They were the ones I had been forced to sign after a fight with Caleb. He had always threatened me with them if I didn't obey him. Caleb tried to grab the papers, but the pain was too much for him to move. He just had to lie back on the stretcher. "Excuse me, but please leave now." I said this, and the paramedics finally took Caleb away in the ambulance. He must have looked like the pitiful husband whose wife had divorced him. He deserved to feel embarrassed. I watched the ambulance drive off and then left the house. It took some time, but the divorce papers were accepted, and everything was finalized. While Caleb was in the hospital for a week, I packed up my things and sent them to my parents' house. Then one day, I ran into Caleb at the grocery store. "Lydia, please don't do this. You love me, don't you? Please don't leave me. I know I've made mistakes. I got carried away because you always listened to me." The arrogance he used to have was gone, and he looked completely pathetic. "What are you talking about? The divorce is already final. It's too late for you to act like this. Live your life however you want." He couldn't believe that I was actually going through with the divorce. He looked shocked, his hands shaking, and his face turning pale. Well, that's that then, bye. It had been 6 months since Caleb and I got divorced. One day, he showed up at my parents' house. He kept ringing the intercom and calling my name so loudly that I had no choice but to answer. He still wanted me to get back together with him. When I didn't respond, he started telling me about his life now. He couldn't cook because he had always made me do all the housework. Now, he only eats TV dinners or eats out. He had gained 10 pounds since the divorce, with extra fat around his face and stomach. He also didn't know how to do laundry. His shirts were always wrinkled and smelled bad, making him look dirty. "I finally realize how great you were, Lydia. If I don't do something, people at work won't like me," Caleb said, starting to cry with fake tears. Basically, he wanted me to go back to being his servant. "I will never go back to that. Never. If you keep making noise, I'll call the police," I told him coldly. When he realized I meant it, he got scared and left, crying. I was sure he wouldn't bother me again. I hoped so. Caleb seemed to be living a very inconvenient life. Meanwhile, I was living comfortably. I had stayed at my parents' house for a while, but now I had my own small apartment and lived alone. My living standards were lower than when I lived with Caleb, but I liked my life this way. I had time for myself. I thought it would be hard to find a job at my age, but a friend of mine knew someone who had retired, and I was able to take her place. I was so happy being able to spend my time and money on myself, without anyone telling me what to do. From now on, I want to live at my own pace. This is the start of a new chapter in my life.
If the ownership of this house isn't transferred to me, I'm contemplating a divorce. I was taken aback when my husband suddenly dropped this bombshell. This house holds precious memories of our family, and I can't bear to part with it. Despite my emotional attachment, my husband is threatening me, toying with my feelings. Distraught, I reached out to my father for help. I am Emily, a 30-year-old full-time housewife, dedicating my days to supporting and managing our household. I married John 2 years ago, and since quitting my job after marriage, my husband has been the breadwinner. However, our peaceful life took a turn for the worse after my father-in-law's passing, leading to my mother-in-law moving into our apartment. Surprisingly, I was informed about my mother-in-law's move the day before she arrived. Nonchalantly, my husband announced her impending arrival as if it were the most natural thing. It caught me off guard, and I questioned the suddenness of it. I forgot to mention earlier that my mother would also be coming to live with us from tomorrow. As soon as my husband came home, he casually mentioned her arrival, asking me to prepare and clean up. I was bewildered by the news. I thought she was coming over for a visit, but my husband clarified that she was moving in. The decision was made without any prior discussion with me, and the very next day, my mother-in-law arrived with numerous luggages. "It's been a while. I'm glad you look well, Mary. Please come in," I greeted her. However, she seemed displeased for some reason. As she entered, she questioned why I didn't come to pick her up, emphasizing that it's common sense to meet at the station, especially when you know your mother-in-law is arriving. While carrying the hefty luggages, "I didn't know what time you'd arrive. In that case, shouldn't you have contacted me? You're so thoughtless." I apologize. This is why they say some daughter-in-laws are useless and inconsiderate. Grumbling, the mother-in-law settled heavily on the sofa. Despite being a guest in our home, she acted as if she owned the place. I couldn't believe it. From that day on, her snide comments became even more intense. As soon as my husband left for work, the barrage began. "Emily, why are you sitting there? Do the dishes. You should have finished the laundry in the morning. That's common knowledge." "I'm sorry, I'll do the laundry once the dishes are done." You have the wrong priorities. In my house, it's a rule to do laundry immediately after breakfast. But that rule is just to do as you're told. Haven't your parents taught you not to make excuses? I had my own daily routine, and it seemed that Mary couldn't understand that I wasn't refusing to do the work. Even if I did things her way, she would still find fault and complain every day. The daytime hours alone with her were especially challenging. One day, I had an epiphany on how to end this living hell with my mother-in-law. The plan was to move to the house I inherited from my father and live in a separate home from her. My father retired early a few months ago, and my parents started a new life in the countryside. They then passed on their house to me. Fortunately, that house isn't too far from our current apartment, and we were planning to move eventually. Living with my mother-in-law had reached my limits, so I decided to talk to my husband about moving sooner. "John, can we talk for a moment?" "What's up? Anything happened?" "Remember the house my father gave us? What do you think about moving there?" "Oh, that house. We did talk about moving there someday. Why the sudden decision?" "Well, I've been having some difficulties with your mother. She never mentioned anything, but I can't bear living with her anymore. That's why I'm seriously considering moving. Observing that the new place isn't too far, I suggested we move there, allowing my mother-in-law to stay in the current apartment." Surprisingly, my husband agreed to the move. After informing Mary, we decided to make the move a week later. Honestly, I anticipated some opposition from her, but she accepted our decision with a big smile. "Goodbye, John and Emily. I'm so sorry for the sudden decision to move. Don't worry about it. It's wonderful that your father gave you the house. He's very sweet. Thank you. Please visit us sometime. Of course, it's not too far from here, and I hope you visit me regularly too." "I will." After the conversation, I headed to our new home with my husband, feeling relieved that I wouldn't have to endure snide remarks anymore. I could now live freely at my own pace. Although I had initially feared Mary's opposition, consulting with John brought me peace. However, my peace did not last. Despite being able to keep my distance from my mother-in-law and reduce stress, my husband started coming home late. It wasn't just the late returns. There were days when he wouldn't come home at all. He defended his actions, saying he was worried about his mother, but it became too frequent. Without informing me, he went to her house, had dinner with her, and sometimes stayed overnight, disrupting my daily life. This can't go on, I thought one day. I sat him down for a talk. "John, you've been coming home really late lately, and sometimes you don't even come home at all." "Is that so? I'm just worried about my mother." "That's not the point. At least let me know beforehand that you'll be late, so I'll know I don't have to prepare dinner. Since you're a housewife and always at home, you can eat the leftovers for lunch the next day, right? So you're saying I should just accept everything quietly because I'm a housewife. Are you saying we shouldn't talk about this? Isn't that the truth? Housewives just relax at home." "What? What are you saying? Anyway, I'm worried about leaving my mother alone. Ellie will be coming back soon, and I need to discuss some things with her. Wait, Ellie is coming back. What does he need to discuss with her? Curious, I asked my husband. We're moving Ellie here to live with us. Live together? Yes, she kept saying she wanted a big house like the one she lived abroad. That's why I thought of letting her stay in this house. What? I don't understand. Suddenly informed of this, I couldn't think of anything. Is my sister-in-law going to live in this house? I had barely escaped from Mary's constant complaints, and now his sister, Ellie, was going to live in this house. I couldn't wrap my head around it. This was the house I inherited from my father. It felt unnatural. It's the only big house that would satisfy Ellie, my husband argued. The apartment where we used to live is now where my mother stays, and it's too small for 4 people. But I never intended to live with Ellie. I don't plan to live together either. I intend to give this house to Ellie, my husband declared. What? Why? Because we plan to move back with my mother. Ellie can use this house freely, he explained. I was taken aback by my husband's unreasonable proposal and felt like fainting. Despite my repeated insistence that I had no intention of living with my mother-in-law, my husband eventually became furious. Can't you be a little more considerate? You can live because of me, so just do as I say. Enough is enough of your jokes. This house is precious to me, inherited from my father. Why should I give it to Ellie? Such a wonderful house is wasted on you, isn't it? I've already told Ellie that I've got her a large house. It's too late to say otherwise now. I wasn't consulted in any of this decision. Either way, I can't accept it. You're always complaining. Enough. Calm down and think. I'll go back to my mother's for a while. My husband angrily slammed the door and left. Left alone in the room, tears streamed down my face. I couldn't understand why my husband decided everything on his own. It's unimaginable that he intends to give away the house I inherited from my father to my sister-in-law. Every day, my husband sent me messages asking if I had calmed down and to come back soon. Each time, I had to firmly tell him that I had no intention of agreeing. Then, one day, he said something shocking over the phone. Hey, Emily, when will you come here and live with me? Stop nagging. I've said it so many times. I have no intention of living with Mary. Moving there and giving this house to Ellie. I've already told Ellie. Stop being selfish. She might be coming back this week, so there's no time. Why should I give up my house for your family? I inherited this house from my father. Don't decide on your own. Who do you think you're talking to? Even my mother is furious. I'm at my wit's end. That's not my problem. You're ignoring my feelings, I responded. My husband let out a big sigh over the phone, clearly frustrated. Then he said something shocking. If you can't listen to me, then let's divorce. Hand over the house to Ellie. Leave by tomorrow. At that moment, my love for my husband quickly faded. Threatening me with the word divorce was utterly despicable. I couldn't possibly forgive him for using divorce as a threat without considering someone's feelings. I couldn't allow these people to have their way. Burning with anger, my husband continued to speak with a triumphant and dominating tone. Listen, if you don't leave by tomorrow, I'll really divorce you. That it? Wait, are you serious? Of course I am. You don't have a choice. What will you do if you, a housewife, get divorced? You can't survive. Enough, I get it. Good. Hurry up and move over here. My mother is looking forward to disciplining you. He hung up the phone with a confident tone, thinking I would do as he said. After that call, I made up my mind and decided to seek help from my father for a plan. The next day, everything was ready for the move. I replied calmly when asked. By the way, I'm curious about when Ellie will be back. She'll be back tomorrow. Why are you so obsessed with Ellie? Between you and me, she seems to have made a lot from stock investments. I see. So if you provide her with a house, maybe you can ask for financial help. That's so like you. Anyway, you need to leave that house by today. It's inconvenient for all of us. Don't worry. I've already moved. What? What do you mean? My husband seemed genuinely surprised. I knew it. You don't want to divorce me, do you? Naturally. Without an income, you can't survive. But all of this is coming to an end. We're still married now, so that's why we're talking. Wait, what? I can only think about divorce now. My husband was clearly shaken by my words. You promised to move out of that house, right, and live with me. But you've already moved. What are you saying? Of course, I won't live in a house with a husband who decides everything on his own and a bullying mother-in-law. Why are you including me? You promised to move out for Ellie. I said I've already moved, didn't I? I did as you said. Enough with the jokes. Where are you now? My husband's tone was panicky, and he was clearly losing his cool. Actually, I'm at my parents' house. Why? I moved to my parents' rural home. I don't plan on returning to where you guys are. You should have told me that sooner. My husband replied with a hint of relief in his voice. If I could just give that house to Ellie, it doesn't matter where you live. It would require $3,300,000. $3,300,000. I put the house I inherited from my father up for sale. And if you truly want to give it to Ellie, buy it for $3,300 and then hand it over. Are you joking? I'm serious. The house was still in my father's name, so I asked him to sell it. In reality, what I asked my father for was to sell the house. My father had always said, if something happens, contact me. You can live or sell this house as you like. I'll help you. As a result of the valuation, a price of $3,300,000 was proposed, which I gladly agreed to and put the house on the market immediately. My husband probably never saw this coming. He spat out insults, consumed with anger. Why are you doing this without asking me? This is unforgivable. I'm not asking for nor do I need your approval. We're getting divorced soon anyway. I don't care. Do you understand your position? You'll be the one in trouble if we divorce. Since you don't have an income, you're just a housewife. I'd rather struggle on my own than be with you forever. Listen, Ellie will be coming back soon. I told you I'm relying on Ellie's money, didn't I? So what? Like I said, if you want to let dear Ellie live in that house, just buy it for $3,300,000. That is if you can. What? That's impossible. If Ellie has made a lot of money from her investments, I don't see why she can't afford it. I don't know how much she made, but that's too much. She can never afford it. My husband was all excuses with no hint of an apology, maintaining his domineering attitude. I felt it was foolish to spend any more time on him and unleashed everything I wanted to say. I'm done with you and this ridiculous mess. Did you think threatening divorce would make me give up the house? If you thought being a housewife meant I'd do whatever you say, you're so wrong. Hey, let's calm down and talk. I am calm. Isn't it you who's panicking? I won't be controlled by you or your family anymore. Stay out of my life. Go to hell with your beloved mother, you mama's boy. I shouted loudly enough for the whole neighborhood to hear, then abruptly hung up the phone. Of course, I'd had enough of these insane calls from my husband, so I blocked his number. I immediately consulted my lawyer and decided to request a divorce. It took some time, but the divorce was finalized, recognizing my husband's fault. He and Mary still live in that apartment. As for Ellie, they couldn't provide the large house she wanted, and she was furious, claiming this wasn't the deal, and made a U-turn back overseas. My ex-husband's plan to seek financial assistance from his successful sister fell through. And now he seems to be struggling financially, having to pay me alimony and support his mother. As long as he continues to live with such a selfish mother, his life will never be prosperous. On the other hand, I've moved to the countryside and am enjoying peaceful days with my parents. I recently started a clerical job at a small company introduced by a neighbor. With that salary, I can live comfortably. I plan to live here for a while. I want to be by my parents' side as much as possible to repay the kindness they show me.
Greetings. Am I exhibiting a lack of open-mindedness, or is my spouse perhaps displaying excessive naivety? A dispute has arisen between my husband and me, leaving me emotionally drained. My name is Alice, and I find myself in my 30s. My husband, Martin, and I share the responsibility of raising our daughter, Mia, who is on the verge of entering the 3rd grade. Our familial unit, previously including my retired father, now numbers 3, as my father has embarked on a 2-year overseas assignment offered by a certain company. The discord originated with the prospect of accommodating my nephew, Philip, who is set to commence his college education. Given our proximity to his chosen institution, Martin was approached with a request for Philip to reside with us during his academic pursuits. The proposition entails his stay until he achieves financial independence through part-time employment, yet specifics regarding the required savings or timeframe remain elusive. Personally, I harbored reservations about sharing living quarters with a young man whom I encounter primarily during extended family vacations. My home-based professional responsibilities further diminish my enthusiasm for the notion. Upon voicing my concerns to Martin, his response was unforeseeably defensive. His retort questioned my lack of trust in Philip, leading to an impasse where neither party was willing to yield. Initial discussions involving Martin, Thomas's wife, and Philip himself had exhibited unanimous support for the idea. Philip explicitly expressed his desire to be under our care. Martin, however, appeared oblivious to the underlying complexities, dismissing any apprehensions about Mia and regarding the situation with unwarranted optimism. Our disagreement persists, with no resolution in sight. As the proprietor of the house registered under my name, I proposed deferring the decision until my father's return, urging a collective discussion. Martin, however, resisted this proposition, asserting that involving my father was unnecessary and advocating for a swift resolution over the phone. This stance, coupled with his encouragement for Philip's independence, raised doubts in my mind regarding the sincerity of Martin's intentions. The house, though aged, offers ample space, leading me to suspect clandestine discussions between Martin and my in-laws, with Martin striving to maintain a favorable impression on Thomas. Communicating via text during work hours, Martin suggested that the decision could be made without involving my father, emphasizing the surplus of rooms available. Despite my reservations, Martin remained steadfast in his opinion, refusing to budge until a decision was reached, thereby exacerbating the existing deadlock. It is disconcerting to contemplate anyone's displeasure upon discovering that their relatives have been relocated to their residence without consent, especially when they are not present. Martin, however, exhibits a noticeable lack of comprehension. When I inquired about the possibility of our relatives residing rent-free simply due to familial ties, he asserted that they were willing to remit $200, deeming it sufficient for one person. The basis for the in-laws' notion of adequacy remains unclear, as I am convinced that this amount is inadequate by any reasonable standard. The question arises, does $200 cover only monthly groceries? I limit the absence of prior consultation between Martin, Thomas, and me. If only they had sought my input earlier, I could have engaged in a thorough discussion with my father. However, I suspect a reluctance to consult him in advance, perhaps due to his benevolent yet stubborn nature, leading them to anticipate certain conditions. My apprehensions deepen as I entertain the thought that clandestine machinations have been underway since they learned of my father's overseas assignment. Seeking counsel, I decided to confide in a trusted confidant, my close friend Rosalie, a relationship spanning back to our middle school years. Recognizing the gravity of my situation, Rosalie promptly adjusted her schedule and suggested a private setting to ensure our conversation remained confidential. It felt serendipitous as we hadn't caught up in a while. Initially engaging in light conversation, we eventually delved into the heart of the matter. I recounted the entire narrative to Rosalie, detailing Philip's request to move in while pursuing college, with vague assurances of financial independence. Martin, seemingly receptive, deferred the decision to me. Complicating matters, our residence is registered in my father's name, and he is currently overseas, adamantly refusing to engage in any discussion on the subject. In addition to these complexities, I have the presence of my daughter Mia at home, and the prospect of accommodating a male relative who is essentially a stranger leaves me uneasy. Given that the house is registered under Dad's name, securing his approval is undoubtedly imperative. My suspicions regarding the timing of this proposition intensify, particularly as it coincides with Dad's absence from the country. Overwhelmed with emotion during our conversation, tears clouded my ability to articulate my thoughts comprehensively. Nonetheless, Rosie, my attentive confidant, offered unwavering support. With occasional back rubs and gentle encouragement, she urged me to continue sharing. Rosie, after absorbing my account, proffered her insights and counsel. Emphatically, she advised seeking Dad's input before making any decisions. She admonished me for contemplating acquiescence after the fact, highlighting the importance of Martin and Thomas respectfully requesting this favor. Addressing the absurdity of a $200 rent, she questioned the lack of clarity on shared responsibilities such as cooking, laundry, and utilities. The prospect of shouldering these burdens, especially with Martin's frequent work-related absences, raised valid concerns. Whether Martin was cognizant or oblivious to these considerations remained unclear. Rosie, in support of my perspective, pledged assistance if needed, expressing genuine understanding. Buoyed by this interaction, I resolved to discuss the matter with Dad. Martin, however, preempted my decision with a text, absolving himself of responsibility and leaving the decision to me. In response, I firmly conveyed my decision to decline. Martin, perplexed, challenged my rationale, insinuating an aversion to inconvenience. His response, devoid of coherence, aligned with Rosie's earlier assessment, a lack of genuine commitment to assuming responsibility. Realizing the need for a more substantive conversation, I determined to engage with Dad at the earliest opportunity. Martin's underlying concerns about potential conditions were evident. Even if Dad agreed, stipulations such as a curfew, household contributions, and academic diligence would likely be imposed. Given Philip's involvement in karate, weekend attendance at classes might also be required to instill discipline. Failure to meet any of these conditions could prompt Dad to insist on Philip's immediate return to his home country. Yet, in the face of potential conditions, I acknowledged that if Philip truly required this favor, my inclination was not to be perceived as heartless. The following day, I reached out to Dad as planned. Understandably uncomfortable with the notion of someone residing in his home while he was away, he refrained from granting permission. Instead, he proposed involving a real estate agent to facilitate an alternative solution. After concluding my call with Dad, Martin returned home, coincidentally with Thomas, who happened to be in town on business. Seizing the opportunity, I relayed Dad's stance, stating that we couldn't accommodate Philip, but suggested seeking the assistance of a real estate agent to find him suitable accommodation. My directness provoked fury from both Martin and Thomas, who were evidently incensed by the change in plans. They expressed frustration, asserting that their relocation plans were imminent. Martin, in a fit of anger, questioned the need to involve Dad in the decision-making process. As Mia attempted to intervene, Martin's response escalated to the point of physical aggression. In a protective gesture, I interceded, only to be met with a forceful kick to the chest. While I feigned a retaliatory punch, I never intended harm. Martin, deflecting blame, asserted that Mia's fall was solely my fault, attributing 90% of the blame to me. Expressing bewilderment at the sudden upheaval in our harmonious cohabitation, Martin left for his parents' house. Parting with a defiant declaration, he warned against characterizing him as changed or abusive, shifting blame to my actions. Despite Mia's relatively minor injuries, my chest pain persisted, prompting a hospital visit the next day. A broken rib was diagnosed, and a medical certificate was obtained. Concerned for our safety, I requested my aunt's presence and took basic security measures, installing a simple lock. Life has undergone a drastic shift, with Martin opting to commute from his parents' house. He conditions his return on my apology and convincing Dad to allow Philip to stay. However, my sentiments towards Martin have cooled considerably. I believe cohabitation could be manageable if Thomas allowed us to live separately with occasional assistance. The insistence on living together remains perplexing. I question the fragility of familial bonds and whether distant blood relations should supersede the well-being of close family ties. Despite my contemplation, answers elude me. For now, my primary focus is ensuring a safe environment for Mia. Even if Martin were to return, my concerns persist, and divorce is now a consideration. My best friend, Rosie, was correct. The idea of letting a relative, even a family member, reside in a house under my dad's name is unthinkable. I plan to seek advice from my dad again. An update 2 months later. Following heated arguments about allowing my brother-in-law's son to move in with us for college, the divorce has been finalized. After informing my dad about the details, he expressed his intention to return to the country. I had a conversation with Mia, explaining that we would no longer be living with Martin due to the divorce. Though she seemed saddened, she didn't voice any opposition. Witnessing her emotional response tightened my chest, both physically from my rib pain and emotionally from the strain. In my search for legal representation, Rosie once again proved invaluable, connecting me with a divorce attorney. Martin, since returning to his family home, maintained complete silence, ignoring my texts. When Dad and Martin finally spoke over the phone upon Dad's return, Martin insisted that the broken rib was 20% my fault and 80% mine, claiming victimhood. Resisting further inquiry, Martin asserted, "I don't owe you any explanations." When the topic of divorce arose, he was initially defiant, telling me to proceed if I wished. However, during mediation, Martin's stance softened, leading to a settlement involving compensation for the divorce, child support, and damages for the abuse towards Mia and me. In a surprising turn, Thomas reached out to apologize, and revelations about Martin's undisclosed actions came to light. Initially, Martin had promised to contribute $200 for Philip's living expenses, a detail he had withheld from me. As it turns out, Martin was in discussions with his in-laws about them providing him with approximately $800. In essence, he was attempting to siphon off funds from them, explaining his vehement insistence on having us all live together. While Martin enjoyed golfing, a seemingly expensive hobby, I believed he was managing within his personal budget. The revelation that he harbored a love for gambling, particularly horse racing, dating back to his college days, came as a shock. Neither during our dating nor after our marriage did he display any signs of this inclination. Unbeknownst to me, he had been secretly accumulating debt, amounting to around $20,000, which left me stunned. Upon learning this, Thomas understandably expressed fury, condemning Martin for taking advantage of their kindness and exhibiting far worse intentions. Thomas questioned how Martin could resort to violence and emphasized that his change in behavior likely stemmed from the fear of his debts becoming public knowledge. When Thomas confronted Martin, he proposed a solution. Martin could stay at their old house, contributing some funds for living expenses while commuting. Thomas naively trusted Martin and felt gratitude, assuming the arrangement was settled. Upon revisiting this with his wife and acquaintances, they realized the imprudence of their behavior and extended a thick envelope as a gesture of apology. Clearly, it contained apology money. However, forgiveness towards Martin was not on my agenda. Despite being unaware of these financial matters, I still harbored trust issues towards Thomas. In my view, if they had the means to prepare that much money, they should have supported their son from the outset, aiding him in becoming self-sufficient and preventing the current predicament. I politely declined Thomas's offer, and he extended his apologies once more before leaving. Several months post-divorce, Mia and I have been attending counseling twice a month. Dad's return overseas prompted occasional requests for support from my uncle and his wife, contributing to a sense of stability. However, an unexpected letter arrived from Martin. Despite my initial reluctance to open it, I sighed and decided to read it before discarding it. The letter was disconcertingly self-serving, with Martin expressing regret for losing his temper and acknowledging his financial struggles. He insinuated that honesty might have offered a solution, questioned Mia's loneliness without a father, and asserted his commitment to change for the better. The letter concluded with a suggestion to reconsider living together as a family once his debts were settled. Recognizing the self-serving nature of the letter, I shared it with my uncle and his wife. Concerned about potential risks, they promptly contacted a lawyer to arrange a restraining order. The terms stipulated that any future contact from Martin would incur a demand for $1,000 in emotional damages each time. The threat of reporting him to the police for stalking was formalized in a document sent to Martin. Though apprehensive, my uncle and his wife assured me that they would handle the situation. In an unexpected turn, my in-laws, perhaps feeling guilty, are cooperating and monitoring Martin. Seeking Thomas's assistance through the lawyer revealed that Martin is currently mentally unstable. While still employed, he occasionally mutters to himself, causing worry even to Thomas, who has facilitated his counseling. The realization that Martin had taken out loans in secret and could resort to violence brought relief for the decision to divorce. Gratefully, I can work from home without financial concerns, and Mia is gradually settling emotionally while attending school. Hoping for calm days ahead, I aim for a peaceful life moving forward. My name is Ashley. At 32, I find myself deftly managing a desk position at a modest firm while also overseeing the affairs on the domestic front. Gilbert, my husband, and I encountered each other through mutual acquaintances, and we've now celebrated 3 years of marital bliss. The initial honeymoon euphoria has dissipated, leaving behind a settled tranquility. Our day-to-day existence is predominantly stress-free and harmonious, a cocoon just for the two of us. Ashley, did you truly infuse the suplex flavor with chicken bones and vegetables? My sincere apologies, but the entrance and the bathroom were not attended to with the meticulous care they deserve, revealing an aspect of upbringing that warrants consideration. Are you paying attention? During the summer hiatus, I found myself obligated to sojourn at my in-laws, where I assumed a role akin to a servant under the scrutinizing gaze of Carolina. Each respite brought forth a litany of critiques, a ritual that seemed to accompany every significant break. I perceived it as a norm, considering the challenges encountered by friends with their own mother-in-law dynamics. Patience, I believed, would eventually quell these discordant moments. Around that juncture, Robert, Gilbert's brother, entered matrimonial bonds. Robert, a reserved gentleman in stark contrast to the more effervescent Gilbert, welcomed into his life Sarah, a youthful and modern beauty 12 years his junior. The union, albeit seemingly unconventional, filled Carolina with exuberance, heralding the first Christmas with the newlyweds. As they were occupied with work until Christmas, the plan was for Robert and Sarah to join us then. Consequently, I found myself extending my stay at the in-laws' abode from Christmas Eve onward. This decision, however, intensified Carolina's zeal to delegate tasks and oversee preparations for the impending festivities. Are you still engrossed in cleaning? At this rate, Christmas will arrive before you complete your chores. Hurry and prepare the gratin, she chided. Oh, I can hardly wait for tomorrow. She's my son's young wife, and I must acquaint her with the intricacies of our traditions, she added with evident anticipation. Observing Carolina's fervor, I sighed in silence, a sympathetic witness to the impending induction of Sarah into the fold. On the morrow, I endeavored to assist Sarah, offering empathy rather than sheer jubilation at our shared circumstance. Around noon the next day, Robert and his wife Sarah made their entrance. Despite Sarah's seemingly flamboyant demeanor, her demeanor exuded courtesy and left a favorable impression on me. In contrast, Carolina appeared preoccupied, diligently searching for any lapse on Sarah's part. First impressions, it seemed, held paramount significance. Ashley swiftly served the coffee and commenced preparations for the Christmas feast. "And you, Sarah, follow suit," Carolina directed, prompting a startled reaction from Sarah. "A son's wife belongs in the kitchen, doesn't she?" she added, guiding her son and his wife with a stern look.
The scent of expensive cologne and judgment filled the air at La Maison, my father's favorite restaurant where he insisted on hosting his 60th birthday celebration. I adjusted my simple navy blazer, bought off the rack at a department store, and tried to ignore the way my sister Amanda's eyes narrowed at my choice of attire. "You could have at least tried to dress for the occasion, James," she said, smoothing her own designer dress. "It's Dad's birthday." I smiled and took another sip of water, letting her words roll off me like they had for the past 5 years. 5 years since I'd walked away from the family's precious investment firm. 5 years of building something of my own in secret. 5 years of being the family disappointment. My brother Michael arrived late, as usual, but no one seemed to mind. He was, after all, the golden child, the one who'd taken my place at Kingston Investment Partners after I left. He kissed our mother's cheek, clapped Dad on the shoulder, and then turned to me with that familiar smirk. "Well, if it isn't the janitor," he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Still cleaning offices at night, little brother?" I met his gaze calmly. "Building maintenance supervisor," I corrected, though it didn't matter. They'd already written their own version of my story. Dad cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with my presence, but too polite to say it outright. "Let's order, shall we?" The waiter appeared with menus, bound in leather, that probably cost more than what my family thought I made in a month. I could feel Mom's pitying glance as I studied the prices, probably assuming I was calculating if I could afford my portion. "Order whatever you want, James," she said softly. "It's our treat." Michael snorted into his wine glass. "Of course it is. When isn't it?" I thought about the documents sitting in my office safe across town, about the deals closing tomorrow morning, about the announcement that would air on every major network. But I just nodded and ordered the cheapest pasta on the menu. Sometimes the best revenge is letting people underestimate you just a little longer. The conversation flowed around me like I was a rock in a stream, present but inconsequential. Dad talked about the firm's latest acquisitions, Michael bragged about his new Mercedes, and Amanda detailed her recent charity gala organizing efforts. Mom occasionally tried to include me with questions about my work situation, each one dripping with concern that felt more like pity. "You know," Michael said, cutting into his Wagyu steak, "there's still an entry-level position open in our compliance department. If you're finally ready to stop playing around and get serious." I stirred my pasta slowly. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm good where I am." "Good?" Amanda scoffed. "You live in a 1-bedroom apartment and work nights. That's not good. That's settling." Speaking of settling, Mom interjected, probably trying to change the subject. "Have you thought more about going back to school? It's never too late to finish your MBA." I had to bite back a laugh. My real education had come from walking away, from learning how real estate really worked from the ground up, from building a network of people who saw value in actions rather than family names. "I'm learning plenty," I said simply. Michael laughed, that sharp, dismissive sound I'd grown to expect. "Learning what?" how to mop floors, how to change light bulbs. Real estate is about power, connections, vision, things you clearly don't understand. If he only knew about the meetings I'd had that morning, about the towers rising across the city with my company's invisible fingerprints all over them, about the fact that the building we were sitting in right now was one of my recent acquisitions, purchased through a holding company that even our family's precious firm hadn't managed to trace. Maybe, I said, taking another bite of pasta. Dad sighed, that heavy, disappointed sound I'd heard so often. James, we're just worried about you. You had such potential. Top of your class at business school before you dropped out, fast-tracked to partner at the firm. Everything laid out perfectly. And you threw it all away to what? Work as a janitor? Building maintenance supervisor. I corrected again, more out of habit than hope they'd listen. Same thing, Michael snapped. You're cleaning up after people who actually matter, after people like us. I checked my watch. 7:58 p.m. The news would break in exactly 2 minutes. I took a slow sip of water and waited. Your father's right, Mom added, reaching across to pat my hand. It's not too late to turn things around, to be part of the family properly again. The restaurant's background music suddenly cut out, replaced by the familiar jingle of the evening news. The massive screen mounted above the bar, usually showing muted sports games, flickered to life with the volume up. Breaking news, the anchor announced, her voice cutting through the dinner crowd's chatter. In what's being called the largest real estate acquisition in the city's history, mysterious company Summit Horizon has just revealed its ownership of 12 major downtown properties, including... I watched my family's faces as the list scrolled across the screen. Each property worth hundreds of millions, each one acquired quietly over the past 5 years, while they thought I was just scrubbing floors and changing light bulbs. Who the hell is Summit Horizon? Michael demanded, pulling out his phone. How did we miss this? I set down my fork and waited for the next part. The anchor continued, and in a surprising revelation, Summit Horizon's CEO has been announced as James Kingston, who reportedly built the billion-dollar empire while working as a building maintenance supervisor. The silence that fell over our table was absolute. 5 sets of eyes turned to me in perfect synchronization. I dabbed my mouth with a napkin and finally allowed myself a small smile. Anyone want dessert? I asked quietly. I own the restaurant, so it's my treat. The look on Michael's face was worth every night I'd spent learning the real estate business from the ground up, worth every condescending comment, worth every family dinner where they treated me like a cautionary tale. Dad's hand shook as he reached for his wine glass. James, he started, but for once, he seemed to have no words. I stood slowly, straightening my department store blazer. I should go. I have an early meeting tomorrow. We're acquiring another property. I paused, then added, Actually, it's one your firm has been trying to buy for months. Better luck next time, Michael. As I walked toward the door, I could hear the whispers starting, could feel the ripple of recognition spreading through the restaurant as other diners connected the news announcement to the scene they just witnessed. I stopped at the host's stand and handed the maitre d' my card. The Kingston party's bill is on me, I said, loud enough for my family to hear. Make sure they get whatever they want for dessert. After all, I glanced back at their stunned faces. Family takes care of family, right? The morning after Dad's birthday dinner, I sat in my real office. Not the maintenance supervisor's closet I'd used as cover, but the top floor of Summit Tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city I'd quietly been reshaping for the past 5 years. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since last night. 27 missed calls from Michael, 15 from Amanda, 43 from Dad, 19 from Mom, and exactly 156 text messages, each one more desperate than the last. I scrolled through them while sipping my morning coffee, the same brand I'd been drinking when I worked nights. Old habits die hard. James, we need to talk. Dad, how could you keep this from us? Mom, this is a joke, right? Michael, call me back immediately. Lie. Amanda. The last one had come just minutes ago. Family emergency meeting at the firm. 9 a.m. Be there. Dad. I checked my watch. 8:57 a.m. They'd be gathering now in the Kingston Investment Partners conference room, probably expecting me to come running at their summons like I used to. Instead, I turned to my laptop and opened the video conference app. At exactly 9 a.m., I sent them a link. My phone rang immediately. What is this? Michael's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. If you want to meet, we'll do it my way, I replied calmly. Click the link. One by one, their faces appeared on my screen. Dad at the head of their conference table, looking older than he had last night. Mom beside him, eyes red-rimmed like she hadn't slept. Michael pacing behind them, and Amanda perched on the edge of her seat, perfectly manicured nails drumming against the mahogany. Why aren't you here in person? Dad demanded. I leaned back in my chair, letting them see the city skyline behind me. I have 3 other meetings this morning. This was more efficient. Efficient? Michael exploded. You've been lying to us for years, playing some sick game, pretending to be a janitor while. Building maintenance supervisor, I corrected, enjoying how his face reddened at the interruption. And I never lied. You just never asked the right questions. James, Mom started, her voice wobbling. We just don't understand. Why did you let us think? Let us treat you like a failure? I finished for her. Like someone beneath you? That's exactly why. I pulled up a document on my screen and shared it. This is a transcript from the family dinner 3 years ago when Michael announced he was taking my position at the firm. Would you like me to read your exact words, Dad? He paled slightly. That's not necessary. Thank God Michael stepped up. I read anyway. He understands what it takes to succeed in this business. Unlike some people who just didn't have the stomach for real power. Amanda shifted uncomfortably. That was a long time ago. 2 months ago, I continued, switching documents. At cousin Sarah's wedding, Michael told everyone I was finding myself through menial labor. Last Christmas, Amanda suggested I might qualify for low-income housing assistance. And just last night, you all sat there assuming I couldn't afford a meal at a restaurant I own. We were worried about you, Mom protested. No, I said quietly. You were comfortable with me failing. It made you feel better about yourselves. I pulled up another document, this one showing a list of properties and their values. While you were pitying me, I was learning how real estate actually works. Not from the top down, but from the foundation up. I know every inch of my buildings because I've worked in them. I understand the staff because I was the staff. And I built relationships with people you wouldn't even look in the eye. Michael snorted. Is that supposed to impress us? Anyone can get lucky with a few property deals. 17 properties. I cut in. All prime downtown locations. Total portfolio value as of this morning. $3.2 billion. And I smiled slightly. I just acquired the Carson building. The color drained from Michael's face. That's impossible. We've been negotiating that deal for months. I know. I watched your team bungle the negotiations while treating the building manager like he was invisible. Funny thing about invisible people, they notice everything. He called me personally last week to accept my offer. Dad leaned forward, and I recognized the look in his eyes. It was the same one he used to give potential business partners, calculating, measuring, looking for an angle. Son, he said, his voice taking on that smooth, deal-maker tone. Clearly we've underestimated you, but now that we know what you've built, we can work together. Merge your holdings with the firm, combine our resources. No. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. What do you mean no? Amanda asked, incredulous. I mean no. I'm not interested in a merger, or a partnership, or whatever scheme you're already cooking up to get control of what I've built. We're family, Mom pleaded. Family? I laughed softly. Yesterday, I was the embarrassment you've had to explain at parties. Today, I'm family? I pulled up one final document. This is today's schedule for the Carson building. The Kingston Investment Partners office lease expires in 60 days. I won't be renewing it. You can't do that. Michael shot to his feet. That's been our headquarters for 20 years. Actually, I can, and I am. Consider it a reminder of what happens when you judge people based on appearances. I checked my watch. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with the mayor about the downtown revitalization project. A real meeting, in person. James? Wait. Dad started, but I was already reaching for the disconnect button. Oh, and Michael? I added. Clean out your office by the end of the month. Some of us invisible people might need to mop the floors. I ended the call and sat back, letting out a long breath. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. Sir? The mayor's office is on line 1. I straightened my tie, not from a department store this time, and smiled. Put him through. And Sarah? Send a gift basket to the maintenance team at the Carson building. They're about to get some very angry neighbors. As I picked up the phone, I glanced at the framed photo on my desk. It was from my first night as a maintenance worker, mop in hand, name tag crooked. The man who'd taken that photo, my first mentor in the building, had taught me more about real estate than any business school professor ever had. Sometimes, he told me, you have to look up from the ground floor to see how high you can really build. I'd built higher than my family ever imagined possible, and I was just getting started. The next 2 weeks unfolded exactly as I'd expected. My family, never ones to accept defeat gracefully, launched a campaign to either discredit me or force their way into my success. First came the rumors. Whispers in country club lounges about how I must have acquired my fortune through questionable means. After all, how could a janitor build a billion-dollar empire legitimately? I was reviewing acquisition proposals in my office when Sarah buzzed through. Your sister's here. She doesn't have an appointment. I glanced at the security feed. Amanda stood in the lobby, designer handbag clutched like a shield. Looking uncomfortable among the maintenance staff, I'd invited to use our first-floor cafe. Sent her up. When she walked in, her eyes widened at my office. No doubt she'd expected something less impressive. The space probably made her firm's executive suite look like a storage closet. Nice view, she said, trying for casual as she sat across from me. Though the furniture's a bit minimal. I looked at my deliberately simple desk, chosen because it matched the one used by my first supervisor in maintenance. What do you want, Amanda? She pulled out a folder. I've been going through some old family documents. Did you know that technically, as the oldest, I have a claim too? Stop. I held up a hand. The trusts? The ones Dad set up when we were kids. I liquidated my share 5 years ago. Used it as seed money for my first property acquisition. You can't claim what I don't have. Her face fell. But that was only $2 million. I finished. Yes, amazing what you can build from that when you actually understand value from the ground up. That's not fair, she snapped. We didn't know that I was capable. That's exactly the problem. I stood and walked to the window. How's Michael handling the office move? She flinched. He's struggling. Dad too. That building was their legacy. No, I corrected. That building was their comfort zone. They're not angry about losing an office. They're angry about losing control. They sent me to offer you a deal, she admitted finally. Of course they did. Let me guess. They'll stop spreading rumors about my business practices if I lease them back their office space. Her silence was answer enough. I turned back to face her. Here's what's going to happen instead. You're going to leave here and tell them that their threats are as ineffective as their business strategy. Then you're going to watch as I acquire the Wilson portfolio next week. Yes, the same one Michael's been chasing for 2 years. How did you know about Wilson? I smiled. Because I own the building where your firm holds its confidential board meetings. And unlike you, I actually talk to the maintenance staff. They hear everything. Just then my phone buzzed. A text from my head of security. Michael Kingston attempting to access lower-level archives. Right on schedule. Excuse me, I said to Amanda. I have to deal with something. Our other brother just broke into my building's maintenance level, probably looking for evidence of wrongdoing. Her face paled. How did you? Cameras everywhere. Would you like to join me? It should be enlightening. We took my private elevator down. When the doors opened, we found Michael being detained by 2 security guards, both former maintenance workers I'd promoted. Looking for something? I asked calmly. Michael struggled against the guards. You must have dirt hidden somewhere. Nobody builds this much this fast without. Without what? Hard work. Understanding how buildings actually function. Treating people with respect regardless of their position. I nodded to the guards. These men used to work maintenance with me. Now they run my building's security. Because I saw their potential instead of looking down on them. James. Amanda interrupted. You've made your point. What do you want from us? Want? I laughed softly. I don't want anything from you. That's what none of you understand. I built this company by choice, not necessity. I worked maintenance by choice, not failure. I turned to the guards. Please escort my brother out. And Michael? The next time you try to break in, I'll press charges, family or not. That evening, I received an email from Dad. Son, your mother and I have been doing some reflection. Perhaps we were wrong about your choices. The firm is struggling without the Carson building, and your recent acquisitions have shown us that maybe we don't understand the market as well as we thought. I'd like to have dinner. Just us. No business talk. No deals. Just a father trying to understand his son. Dad. I stared at the message for a long time, remembering all the dinners where they'd looked through me, all the times they'd dismissed my ideas, all the moments they'd chosen prestige over understanding. Finally, I replied, Dad, dinner is fine, but not at La Maison. Meet me at Joe's Diner on 4th Street. It's where the maintenance crews eat after night shift. If you want to understand me, start by understanding them. And come alone. No Michael. No Amanda. No hidden agendas. James. The next evening, I sat in my usual booth at Joe's, nursing a cup of coffee. The door chimed, and Dad walked in, looking completely out of place in his bespoke suit. The regular customers, maintenance workers, security guards, cleaning staff, all looked up briefly before returning to their meals. Dad slid into the booth, clearly uncomfortable. Interesting choice of venue. This is where I learned my most valuable lessons about real estate, I said. Not in business school, not at the firm. Here, listening to the people who keep buildings running. He picked up the laminated menu, probably the first non-fine dining menu he touched in decades. I don't understand why you did it this way. Why not just tell us? Would you have listened? I asked quietly. Or would you have tried to control it, shape it into your version of success? He was quiet for a long moment. We thought we were protecting you. No, I said firmly. You thought you were protecting your image of what success should look like. You never asked what I wanted to build. The waitress came over. Maria, whose daughter I'd helped put through college with a scholarship from my foundation. The usual, James, she asked with a warm smile. Thanks, Maria. How's Jessica doing at law school? Top of her class, she beamed. Those books you sent really helped. After she left, Dad stared at me. You know their names, their stories. I know everyone's names, their stories, their potential. That's why I succeeded where you and Michael failed. You see buildings as assets. I see them as communities. Dad looked around the diner with new eyes, finally seeing what I'd seen years ago. Teach me, he said suddenly. I raised an eyebrow. Teach you. Not about business, not about real estate. Teach me how to see what you see. For the first time in years, I heard genuine humility in his voice. Okay, I said slowly. But we start from the ground up. Literally. Tomorrow morning, 5 a.m., meet me at the Carson building. Wear comfortable shoes. What are we doing at 5 a.m.? I smiled. Walking through the building with the maintenance crew. If you want to understand my success, you need to understand where it really started. As we finished our coffee, I noticed Maria bringing over a piece of pie, my usual end-of-meal order. Add his to my tab, Dad said quickly, reaching for his wallet. No need, Maria replied. James owns the diner. Has for 3 years. Never changed a thing, just made sure we all had health insurance and a stake in the business. Dad set down his fork, finally understanding. I hadn't just built buildings. I'd built relationships, trust, and communities. I'm sorry, he said quietly, for not seeing you. Really seeing you. I know, I replied. That's why tomorrow, we start with open eyes. But Dad, this isn't about taking over my company or merging assets. Then what is it about? Learning that success isn't just about what you own. It's about what you build and who you build it with. As we left the diner, Dad looked up at the skyline, my skyline. You know, he said thoughtfully, I never really looked up from my office until now. I smiled. Sometimes you have to start at the bottom to truly understand the view from the top. The next morning, when Dad arrived at the Carson building at 5 a.m., he found me already there, dressed in my old maintenance uniform, helping the crew start their day. The look of surprise on his face was priceless, but the lesson was clear. True power isn't about titles or corner offices. It's about understanding every level of what you build, respecting everyone who helps build it, and never forgetting where you started. Even now, years later, I still keep my old maintenance uniform hanging in my office. Not as a reminder of where I came from, but as a reminder of who I really am. Someone who built success from the ground up, one floor at a time.
I, a 26-year-old woman, was set to be married last week. However, the wedding didn't take place because I made the decision to run away the night before the ceremony. I had been engaged to my 26-year-old boyfriend for 6 months, and we had been in a relationship for 3 years. We'd also shared 2 children, twin boys who were now 1 year old. The arrival of our unexpected twins had initially caused tension, as my boyfriend was against having kids at that time. Despite his reluctance, I insisted on keeping the babies and gave him the option to leave without demanding child support. I believed in my ability to raise my children independently due to my strong maternal instinct. Over time, my boyfriend came around, supporting me throughout the pregnancy and proving to be a good father after the twins were born. 6 months later, he proposed and I accepted. We began planning our wedding, and everything seemed perfect. My parents were thrilled, as they liked my now ex-boyfriend. However, the night before the wedding, a phone call changed everything. We were following the tradition of staying in separate places, and after a heartfelt conversation, he forgot to hang up the call. I remained on the line out of curiosity and overheard a conversation between him and his father, revealing a side of him that made me question our 3-year relationship and the impending marriage. I decided to eavesdrop on their conversation, motivated by my ex-boyfriend's dejected and distant tone when confirming to his dad that he was talking to me. Something felt off, and the subsequent exchange still echoes in my mind a week later. His dad questioned whether my ex still felt the same way as he did 2 days ago, and my ex affirmed. His mother joined the conversation, insisting that regardless of his feelings, he needed to go through with the wedding. This sparked a heated response from my boyfriend, asserting his autonomy and refusing to be pushed around. His dad, however, made a weighty proposition, stating that while they couldn't force him to marry someone he didn't love, they could cut him out of their will. His mother, in turn, lectured him about responsibility, emphasizing that as a father, he needed to grow up and commit. She argued that if he was ready for kids, he should be ready for marriage. My ex expressed his frustration, feeling coerced into marrying me despite not feeling ready, solely to avoid being disinherited. He lamented about the lack of consideration for his readiness for milestones in his life, feeling unfairly pressured into situations he wasn't prepared for. In his complaints, he stormed out, leaving his phone behind. His parents continued to discuss his perceived irresponsibility, prompting me to end the call. Stunned and unsure of what to do, I realized that my boyfriend had agreed to marry me under the threat of disinheritance, a revelation that shook me on the eve of our supposed wedding day. I couldn't fathom the situation for the next couple of minutes. None of his recent behavior had hinted at his unpreparedness. Yes, we had our initial argument when I discovered my pregnancy, but since then, he had been a devoted boyfriend and father. His true feelings were hidden behind a remarkable acting facade. Once I gathered myself, I made a swift decision to escape. Fortunately, my kids were with me, so I drove to a hotel on the outskirts of town. Arriving late, I settled my fussy kids and blocked my boyfriend and his family without explanation. That night, I cried, realizing the past year had been a colossal lie. Eventually, around 4 in the morning, I found some sleep. The wedding expenses were covered by my ex's affluent parents, relieving me of financial concerns. I texted friends and family that the wedding was off, promising to explain later. I made it clear I didn't want them involved with my ex or his family, trusting they'd respect my wishes. On what was supposed to be my wedding day, I stayed in the hotel, grappling with my emotions and finding solace in my son's company. Despite my devastation, I maintained a strong front for their sake. A day later, I returned home to gather my belongings and move out. After leaving my kids with my parents, I faced my ex's expected reaction. He appeared sleep-deprived, panicked, and concerned. Unsure of the authenticity of his emotions, he demanded an explanation for my actions, asserting that my decision warranted an apology to him and his family, dismissing cold feet as an unacceptable excuse for humiliation. I didn't say much. I simply informed him that I had overheard his conversation with his parents the other day. He appeared confused for a moment, and when it sank in, he couldn't hide the shame. I didn't feel the need to elaborate or engage in further conversation. After uttering those words, I entered the house while he waited outside in the yard. Gathering the essentials, I left without exchanging another word. There was nothing left for me to say. He had acted according to his beliefs, and now I was doing what I believed was right. I no longer aspired to be a wife. My focus shifted to being a devoted mother. Almost a week passed without communication, and I thought it was the end for us. I had nothing to express, and he seemed to share the sentiment, or so I believed. However, a few hours ago, he unexpectedly appeared at my parents' place, pleading to speak with me. By now, my parents and close friends were aware of the situation, and they hesitated to let him in. Despite their reservations, I agreed to talk to him one last time. I opted to stay in the front yard, fearing a heated argument that might disturb the sleeping babies. In our conversation, he apologized for everything he had put me through. He professed his love for me, admitting he wasn't ready for marriage. He expressed affection for our children and insisted on being a part of our lives despite the revelations from that night. I found myself at a loss for words, grappling with doubts and trust issues. While he wanted a second chance without his parents' interference, I was uncertain about the path forward. He expressed a desire to work things out, but I couldn't ignore the deception that had persisted for almost a year. Now faced with the decision of whether to give our relationship a second chance, I'm torn. I want my kids to have a relationship with their father, but trust is a significant hurdle. As for myself, a break seems appealing, especially after this tumultuous week. I'm undecided about the future of our relationship. Update. Hey, everyone. It's been a while, and I appreciate the overwhelming support. I've been busy with work, kids, and moving out. The advice I've received has been incredibly helpful. I consulted a lawyer about custody arrangements, and I've decided to pursue full custody. Some people have sent hurtful messages, accusing me of being a selfish mother for considering reconciliation. I want to emphasize that I'm a mother, but I'm also a human being. It's only been a week since that phone call, and moving on completely is a process. This was a 3-year relationship, for goodness sake. In the throes of strong emotions, I genuinely loved him, and that vulnerability led me to consider reconciliation. However, as I've regained stability, I recognize the imperative of prioritizing myself and my children. Despite the initial hurtful judgment on the internet, I anticipated it in this digital age. 2 days after calling off the wedding, I began the search for a lawyer, a process that took time as I sought someone I felt comfortable with and could trust completely. Custody discussions were never part of our prior conversations, as we never foresaw such a circumstance. Now that we're at an impasse, I believe it's crucial to take legal measures to secure my children's well-being. While I doubt my ex's desire for custody, I'm wary of his conservative and orthodox parents who may object to their son not having custody of their grandchildren. I'm preparing for potential challenges. Our last conversation was around 3 days ago, and the lack of contact since then reinforces that, regardless of his words, he's not ready to be with me or willing to make the necessary changes. His recent expressions of wanting to make things work appear hollow and meaningless. The eroded trust between us makes it clear that I won't be with a man who doesn't genuinely want to be with me. Ending the relationship is the best course of action. I plan to communicate my decision soon, hoping it won't escalate into a custody dispute. Update 2. I've informed my ex that I won't be getting back with him and that I intend to file for full custody. I assumed he would understand, given his earlier admission of not being ready for marriage or kids. However, he reacted poorly, engaging in arguments and insisting I couldn't make this decision. I expected him to appreciate not being forced into something he wasn't prepared for. But his reaction has heightened the challenge. Oh, okay. Good on you for managing preschool then. I got her in because I was diagnosed with depression after my husband's death. I got a doctor's note and everything. Wow, I didn't know that was an option. Anyway, the reason I came today is that I need advice. Elizabeth's next statement left me shocked. Would you mind paying our property taxes? What? What property taxes? Where is this coming from? We don't have money to pay property taxes. Why would you think we'd pay it for you? You said we could ask you for anything, didn't you? Well, yes, but plus you guys were the ones who insisted we live on that land. We never insisted. Regardless, property taxes for that land are higher than other places, and it's really causing us problems. Why don't you just work a bit and pay yourself? I can't work. I've even got Emily in preschool based on the excuse that I can't work due to mental illness. That's not our problem. Please, if we can't pay the property tax, we won't be able to live in that house. Look, I don't know all the details, so I'll discuss it with Robert when he gets home. Please do. After showing up out of the blue and making such an unexpected request, Elizabeth left. When Robert got home, I told him about Elizabeth's sudden visit and her asking us to pay property taxes. Of course, Robert was surprised, but he was also angered by her audacity. A few weeks later, we invited Elizabeth over to our house to discuss something important. We timed it so that her daughter, Emily, was at preschool, allowing the three of us to talk. Elizabeth arrived in a good mood. She probably thought we were going to help her with her property taxes. Robert, it's been a while, Elizabeth greeted. You seem well. I heard from Jennifer, but let's hear it from you. What do you want to talk about? Well, I hate to be a bother, but I came to ask for help with the property taxes, she admitted. Why can't you pay them yourself? Is there a reason? I'm still dealing with emotional stress and can't work. With a young child, I just don't have the money for the taxes. So you can't handle unexpected expenses. Exactly. The property taxes are way too high. After all, it was you guys who decided we should buy that house on that land, so it's your responsibility to help us out. Why? You had the money in the first place. I'm a single mom, and it's tough. Survivor's benefits alone don't cut it. I'm barely making ends meet and can't handle sudden expenses like taxes. You're lying about not having money, Robert retorted. I'm not. I lost a breadwinning husband. Are you out of touch with reality? If you think I don't know anything, Robert said something rather cryptic. Hearing those words, Elizabeth's expression changed slightly. Whoa, you're scaring me, Robert. You're getting more than just survivor benefits, aren't you? What are you talking about? That's all I get, she defended. It's pointless to lie. I know everything. You're getting money from life insurance too. Elizabeth remained silent. My brother had life insurance, you know. He was insured for about $1,000 a month until about age 60. So, as his wife, it's my right to receive that money. You have no right to question me. But you do get a good amount of money every month with survivor's benefits and the insurance money, don't you? It's still not enough for everyday living. We have a mortgage. You've paid off the mortgage, haven't you? Don't you also get various other forms of assistance? How do you know all this? My brother consulted with me about everything, especially financial matters. So I know it all. I see. But like I said before, I'm his wife, and Emily is his daughter. How we use that money is none of your business. Fair point. But since money is coming in, you should manage it properly and pay your own taxes. Robert, you work for a big corporation, and you're rich. Why can't you just help us out a little? You're being too stingy. Elizabeth still seemed unconvinced, listening to this conversation. I finally understood why Elizabeth, even after losing her husband, continued to live lavishly without working. I couldn't complain. Money was something her late husband left for her. But Robert wasn't done talking, and that's when I learned an unbelievable fact. So earlier, you said the kid is James's. Is that true? What are you talking about? Of course it is. Well, that's good because if it's not, we have a big problem. Isn't that quite rude? I just lost my husband. Don't start accusing me of things. I, who had been silently listening, quickly interjected. That's crossing the line, man. But Robert continued. You see, my brother consulted me when he found out about their pregnancy. What about him? He said that judging by the due date, there's no way the child could be his. What do you mean? He was always on an extended business trip and hadn't been home during that time. He was worried that the child might not be his. That's absurd. I thought so too initially. James said there was no evidence of an affair. Then he passed away before we could gather any. So it was a misunderstanding, right? After James was gone, I couldn't shake off the thought. So I investigated. What? Whether you had been unfaithful. My jaw dropped next to me in a state of shock from this newfound information. Robert continued speaking to Elizabeth. I was planning to take my time gathering evidence, but since you came to our home, I hurried my investigation. And what did you find? You're living with another man now, aren't you? So what if I am? He's someone I started seeing after my husband passed. I see. I was wondering if the man you're living with is the child's father. But it turns out he's not Emily's father. It's your brother, H. Do you have any proof? Sorry to say, I approached Emily and the man at the park and got a single hair strand from their clothing. That's creepy. I do feel a bit guilty, but it's for my brother. And what did you do with it? James is no longer with us. So I submitted the hair, along with mine, for a DNA test. According to Robert, even if it's not from the father, a close relative can provide enough genetic information for a paternity test. Robert went on. The test showed that Emily is not James's child. Elizabeth looked down, unable to speak. Then she finally spoke, almost in a whisper. So what does that mean? It's heartbreaking for James. Speaking ill of the dead accomplishes nothing, maybe. But since my brother can't find justice, I plan to file a lawsuit against you and your lover for damages. What are you talking about? We're getting married soon. Oh, really? Well, that makes things easier. Since the house is already paid off, you should just sell it. Then you can use that money to pay for both your compensations. Why should I? If you can afford the compensation, you're welcome to stay. But your fiancé doesn't work right. How do you know that? You can get by without working now. But that changes when you're married. It's none of your business. The conversation was far from over, and an angry Elizabeth tried to leave. Robert spoke up. I'll handle the property taxes for you. I'll also start the process for selling the house. Angry, Elizabeth stormed off and eventually sold the house, just as Robert suggested. The house sold quickly due to its desirable location and being relatively new. Elizabeth paid the compensation with the money from the sale. Apparently, Elizabeth and her man got married. But because of that, she would no longer receive the survivor's benefits she had been getting due to her husband's passing. Ignorant Elizabeth had no clue about this. She bought a cheap used house with the money from the sale. No longer a single mom, her financial aid dried up, as did the survivor's benefits. Both Elizabeth and her new husband had to start working. Elizabeth, once a spender on fashion and beauty, marked the start of a tougher life. Her husband couldn't keep a job, and the marriage soon fell apart. Elizabeth was back to being a single mom, but now with no financial aid coming in, she had to work desperately to make ends meet. For us, the storm has passed, and our peaceful days have returned. We were even blessed with a child we had longed for. I can't wait to meet the child that I will have with my beloved Robert. We will give our child the middle name of my late brother-in-law, ensuring that his memory will always be with us. In my second update, I confronted my ex, expressing my decision not to reconcile and notifying him of my intention to file for full custody. I anticipated he would understand, considering his previous admission of not being ready for marriage or kids. I believed he should have felt grateful that I wasn't pushing him into an unprepared role. However, he reacted poorly, engaging in arguments and insisting I couldn't do this to him. He suggested that breaking up was acceptable, but taking his kids away wasn't. This argument might have made sense in a typical relationship, but our circumstances were far from ordinary. As you already know, my ex had initially opposed having kids, and until a week ago, he wasn't ready to be a father. Suddenly, he was fiercely fighting for custody, raising suspicions of external influence, likely from his controlling parents. During our argument at a restaurant, I attempted to calm him down, embarrassed by the scene he was causing. In an effort to avoid a protracted custody battle that I couldn't afford financially or energetically, I sought a rational conversation. I knew his parents could afford top-notch lawyers, potentially dragging out the legal process. My approach was to reason with him and hope he wouldn't contest custody. I reminded him of his previous stance on not being ready for kids until a week ago, asserting that my proposed arrangement was in the best interest of all involved. I suggested he could live his life unburdened by marriage and kids, while I took care of our children. However, he claimed to have changed his mind, asserting he was now ready to be a father. This sudden shift seemed suspicious, leading me to inquire further. He admitted that his parents pressured him to fight for custody after they learned about the canceled wedding. They accepted that I wouldn't marry him but insisted on joint custody to retain a connection with their grandchildren. Threatened with disinheritance, he begged me to agree to joint custody, but I was disgusted and chose to leave. I couldn't fathom that once again, he was succumbing to his parents' influence, even when I had given him an easy way out. He didn't want to be a father or commit to me. His primary concern was his parents' wealth, driving him to such lengths. If his sole focus was their money, I didn't want him anywhere near our kids. They deserved better. Rejecting child support, I made it clear I didn't want him involved with me or my children. His lack of backbone, willing to do anything to stay in his parents' good graces, was disappointing but unsurprising. Since then, I've blocked him everywhere, refusing to engage in any communication. His last message proposed a joint custody agreement with the promise of splitting his inheritance once his parents passed away, an absurd suggestion that revealed his true priorities. Falling for a spoiled individual was my mistake, as a self-made woman who worked hard for everything. Despite his initial efforts to change, it became evident that he was a skilled actor who had deceived me for 3 years. Now, I see him for who he truly is, and I have no interest in exploring more about him. I am done and content with raising my kids on my own. No father is better than one who rejects fatherhood. I am confident that I made the right decision, hoping he comes to his senses and terminates his parental rights rather than dragging this into a prolonged custody battle. I'll continue praying. Update 3. Hello, everyone. It's been a while, and I'm here to share some good news. Although it's been a lengthy period since the last update, I've been occupied. First and foremost, my babies and I have moved into a smaller apartment that I can now call mine. Unlike the house I shared with my ex, this place is near my parents' house. So my parents can visit occasionally to keep an eye on the kids. Additionally, I've hired a full-time nanny to assist me because I can't afford to stop working. I consider myself incredibly fortunate to be able to afford such help right now. Financially, my parents are providing support, and I am immensely grateful for their assistance. None of us saw this situation coming, but they're doing their best, and I'm truly appreciative of having such loving and supportive parents. Now, onto the part I know people are curious about, my ex. Well, he has officially signed away his parental rights. I can't pinpoint exactly what prompted this change, but my best guess is that he decided to stand up to his parents, or perhaps they finally relented. According to a friend, he has moved out of his previous residence, indicating a shift in his circumstances. He apologized to me once again and expressed a desire to offer financial compensation. However, I declined, as I had no intention of accepting money from my ex-boyfriend. Despite potential criticism for this decision, I remain steadfast. While I've forgiven him, it doesn't mean I have to accept any form of compensation. I simply want to move on, and with my parents' support, we are fully capable of raising my kids without his involvement. I conveyed to him that it was okay but requested no further contact, a boundary he has respected so far. Currently, my focus is solely on my kids, striving to provide them with the best life possible. I have no time for sadness or anger towards my ex. My energy is devoted to being the best mother I can be for my children. That's the update for now, and stay tuned for more stories from Argo relationships. Second story. My name is Jennifer, and I'm married to Robert. Robert has a younger brother named James, who is 3 years younger than him. The woman James brought home as his future wife, Elizabeth, turned out to be surprisingly inappropriate. "Hey, I'm getting married," James said with genuine happiness, introducing us to his fiancée. "Hi, I'm Elizabeth. Nice to meet you." Elizabeth was a flashy dresser adorned in designer brands, her bold makeup making her initially intimidating. However, after talking to her, we discovered she was outgoing and charming. We were genuinely happy for our brother-in-law's upcoming marriage. Robert's parents, unfortunately, had both passed away, his mom when he was in 7th grade, and his dad 2 years ago. As a result, neither Robert nor his brother-in-law had parents anymore. "I bet Mom and Dad are celebrating your news up in heaven," Robert remarked. "Look, I've been depending on you for so long, Robert." "I don't expect that to change once we're married," James added. "Don't say that, or I'll be taking care of you forever," Robert replied, and they both laughed joyfully, showcasing their close bond. As we absorbed the sudden engagement news, I inquired about their future living arrangements. "So where are you guys planning to live after getting married?" I asked. "We're thinking of building our own place. The thing is, I travel a lot for work, so we're still undecided on where to build," my brother-in-law answered. Since he often had to travel for work, deciding on a location posed a challenge. "We don't have reliable parents to lean on. If we live near each other, we can help one another if something happens," he explained, highlighting the importance of their close relationship. I concurred, acknowledging that my parents lived far away, and it seemed Elizabeth, his spouse, also had no parents nearby. "That sounds like a good plan," I said. However, Robert and I weren't as affluent as Robert, so the decision to live nearby posed a financial challenge. Though the idea was initially a casual suggestion, they took it seriously and moved into a house relatively close to us. After settling in, we frequently enjoyed barbecues and drinks together, creating pleasant memories. Months later, they received the joyful news of a baby on the way. Tragedy struck, though, as my brother-in-law, elated about the impending arrival, met an untimely end on his usual work trip. Robert was consumed by grief, mourning the sudden loss of his beloved brother. Strangely, Elizabeth, his spouse, didn't appear as devastated as one would expect, considering the circumstances. While she did shed tears, they seemed artificial, leaving me uneasy. Concerned, I reached out to her, offering support for anything she might need after the baby arrived. "Thank you," she replied. But that was the last we saw of Elizabeth. Months later, a birth announcement arrived, prompting us to visit. However, she claimed to be too busy to invite us in, so we left the gift at the door and returned home, bewildered by the inability to see the baby. Our distrust toward Elizabeth grew as she consistently avoided us, citing business whenever we tried to connect. A year passed since my brother-in-law's death when, out of the blue, Elizabeth showed up at our house. "It's been a while, Jennifer. Long time no see. How have you been?" she greeted. Confused, I inquired about the sudden visit. "I came because I need some advice," she explained. When asked about Emily, her response was surprising. "Emily's at preschool. Being alone at home with her all the time was driving me crazy. I enrolled her right after she was born." "Oh, I see. Are you working then?" "Since your tummy is empty after giving birth, you should be able to do the housework, right?" When I returned home after giving birth to triplets, I found out our home had turned into a hole. My husband believed that I had been neglecting house chores using pregnancy as an excuse. He said now that I had given birth, I had no reason to slack off. Seeing me struggle with chores in my frail state, he declared, "I'll call my mother. She'll teach you how you should be as a housewife." My mother-in-law is notoriously strict, And to be honest, I've always found her difficult to deal with. Soon after his phone call, she came around with a furious look on her face. But what happened was something I could have never imagined. I lost my parents when I was young, and I was raised by my grandmother, but she passed away before I graduated from high school. With the help of kind neighbors, I managed to graduate high school. I found a job right after graduation and left my hometown. I had no choice but to sell my grandmother's house, so I no longer have a home to go back to. Fortunately, the people I worked with were very nice to me, and I met someone who I wanted to be married to. When I visited his parents for the first time to announce our marriage, I felt scared by just looking at his mother's strict face. My husband didn't plan to live with his parents, so we started our married life just the two of us. He was a very dependable husband, and though I handled most of the housework, his words with appreciation made me happy. My husband would tell me how good my cooking was, and that alone was enough to make me happy in our marriage. Around our 6-month anniversary, we found out that I was pregnant with triplets. The odds of naturally conceiving triplets are about 1 in 700,000. Since it was my first pregnancy and I had no parents to rely on, I took maternity leave early. I had a strange feeling of happiness mixed with a little fear as my body was changing. A female colleague of my husband, who had been kind to me since we started dating, had gone on maternity leave a few months earlier. She had worked almost until she gave birth, which I found incredibly powerful compared to my situation. I told her that I felt pregnant for the first time and expressed my fears and worries to her. She reassured me, saying everyone's nervous the first time. Her words kept me going as my little babies grew inside me. But my husband didn't see it that way. He accused me of slacking off whenever he noticed the slightest lapse in household chores. I wasn't intentionally cutting corners. Despite my complaints of nausea, heartburn, and fatigue, which I had never experienced before, he dismissed them as my imagination. "I'm out working for the family, and you want me to do the housework you neglected. You do nothing but lie around all day, enjoying 3 meals and naps. How lazy you are." To him, housework wasn't a job. It was a woman's duty. Sure, I did most of the housework before I got pregnant, but he always helped me a little when I asked. When I pointed this out to him, he replied, "Housework is a woman's duty. Of course, you should do 99.9% of it, since I'm the one who earns the money. 0.1% of my help is more than enough." I then realized that there was no point in arguing anymore. I gave up and tried to meet his demands while sneaking in some rest. A few months had passed, perhaps because of this stress. I was hospitalized for a possible premature labor. The triplets were still too small, and an early birth would decrease their chances of survival. So, I was ordered to complete bed rest. I told my husband on the phone, and then he did come after his shift. "But staying in the hospital, you're not even due yet. You asked the doctor to stay in the hospital so you can avoid housework, didn't you?" He accused. Didn't he hear from the doctor? I was shocked. I had called him because the doctor wanted to explain the situation to both of us and asked him to come as soon as possible. "Who's going to cook for me while you're here? You managed to come here for doctor's appointments so far, right? You'll be fine. Let's go home." He started packing my stuff and tried to drag me out of the bed. "Do you know how much it will cost to stay here? I have no intention of paying medical bills for someone who's not even sick. A C-section childbirth should be natural. Don't do anything that deviates from the laws of nature. Shame on you." His mention of a C-section showed that he had at least heard the explanation, but he clearly had not understood any of it. It was too early to give birth. The babies had to grow inside me. Hospitalization wasn't just a choice, it was a necessity. Besides having triplets, a C-section had been the plan from the beginning. I would have preferred a natural birth if it weren't for the triplets. But my husband, who hadn't helped me with anything at all, was full of disdain. "You just got me pregnant, and now you abandoned me." My anger against him was building up. If it were just about me, I can bear it, but 3 new precious lives were growing inside me. I'd do anything to protect them. But no matter how I tried to explain, my husband wouldn't listen. And from the anger, I started struggling to breathe. That's when a midwife rushed into the room. My husband was kicked out of the room, and I could hear him getting scolded. This was a matter of life and death, and his behavior was dangerously close to being reportable. Other pregnant women were so disturbed by him. They complained to him. After that, he behaved himself in the hospital. With one problem less, I thought I could focus on the babies. But I had to have a C-section soon, even though it was a little early for them. My biggest concern was whether they would be born healthy. But to my relief, the triplets were strong and healthy, happy babies. However, because they were born prematurely, they needed to stay in the hospital for a while. Even though my stay was longer compared to natural birth, I was discharged before my babies. When I got home, still feeling weak, I found out that the house had turned into a hole. You're the one who got away from housework for such a long time, so it's not my fault. But since you're back home now, hurry up, clean the house, and cook something for me. It was obvious that while I was in the hospital, he hadn't done anything around the house at all. Instead of washing clothes, he seemed to have just bought new ones and piled them up. I could tell if he was ordering food or buying takeout every night by the dirty food boxes or containers of rotten leftovers all over the place. The awful smell was undoubtedly from all this mess. There was no way I could clean up all this mess in a day or two, and I stood there stunned. You slimmed down around the belly. Should be easier to move around, right? So don't just stand there and get to work. He never visited me when I was hospitalized and didn't even come to pick me up. I was foolish enough to have a little hope that he might welcome me back home. In reality, I should never have expected anything from him. I was still not in the best condition after the delivery, yet I started cleaning up little by little, taking breaks in between. But whenever I was resting, he would find me and say, "Don't slack off, get up, and start cooking. Don't you understand that I should be the priority?" No matter how I tried to explain my situation, he just saw it as an excuse to slack off. I also had to visit the triplets in the hospital and pump milk. I couldn't just clean all the time. He demanded home-cooked meals, but the kitchen was filthy with a pile of garbage. I didn't think it was a good idea to prepare food in such condition, so I resorted to buying pre-cooked meals. I managed to go shopping, but I wasn't recovered enough to cook from scratch. So picking different pre-cooked meals each day was all I could manage. The regret of not being able to carry the triplets to full term haunted me, keeping me awake at night. I think that too contributed to my slow recovery. I begged my husband to take it easy on me, warning him that at this rate, I might end up back in the hospital, but in a different way. But he sternly refused, saying, "I won't accept any more hospital stays just because you want to avoid housework." I continued to sneak in breaks while doing chores. Eventually, I reached my limit and fell asleep without noticing his return. Sleeping instead of greeting me when I returned from work. What a life you have. Do you realize who you owe your livelihood to? You need to be re-educated as a wife. I'll tell my mother about your laziness and have her set you straight. He said that and called his mother right in front of me. He told her, I checked myself into the hospital just to avoid housework and to try to slack off using postpartum as an excuse. He would say his mother was strict with discipline. The memories of her scolding him as a child were still vivid in his mind. I had found her intimidating since the first time I met her. She had always seemed stern and hard to approach. I was terrified that it was my turn to receive strict discipline from my mother-in-law. She was supposed to come the next day, but on the day my husband rushed out of the house to avoid her, using some work-related meeting as an excuse. Right after he left the house, there she was arriving with a fierce look on her face. I braced myself for a scolding before I could even greet her. "What are you doing?" she said. I thought, here comes the criticism for my cleaning. You should be resting after risking your life for giving birth. She took the vacuum cleaner from me, put on her apron, then started to clean. She questioned me if I've been able to have enough rest in a clean bed, and then decided which room to clean first. Once one of the rooms was clean, she told me to rest there. I wondered if it was okay, but my body was already screaming its limits. Intending to rest only briefly, I ended up resting deeply. I woke up and rushed out of the room to look for my meal and found that she had not only taken care of the piled-up laundry, but also prepared a warm meal. Though there were still rooms that needed to be cleaned, the house was transformed into a livable space. I couldn't be more grateful for what she had done all by herself. Then my husband came home. Seeing the living room and entrance cleaned, he was triumphantly convinced that his judgment was right. My mom really did a good job teaching my lazy wife a lesson. I guess I've been too lenient with my wife. I'll learn from you and start being strict with her, he exclaimed. He saw the warm and appetizing meal. He started eating by himself. Suddenly, my mill snatched the meal from him and took the fork out of his hand. Who said you could eat? Get down on the floor, she commanded with an undeniable force, making my husband jump out of his chair and kneel on the floor. She asked him what the hell he had done to his own wife. She said to him, "Childbirth is a life-threatening event, and you, instead of caring for your wife who went through it, made her do household chores. I did not raise such a worthless son. How on earth could you think she stayed in the hospital just to escape housework? You disregard the value of life too much, like a monster wearing human skin. Don't you know what a C-section is? It's surgery where the abdomen is cut open. How dare you leave the house so dirty and do nothing about it while your wife needed to rest in a clean environment? You are the one in need of discipline, not your wife, you useless bust." The scene was unbelievable, like a grown man being scolded like a child. You never change, do you? You take the opinions of others at face value, and when corrected, you become stubborn and refuse to listen. Your father now acts more responsibly, you foolish son, she continued. She questioned him why he mistreated his postpartum wife, and my husband confessed. He was influenced by a male colleague. He was told that women use pregnancy as a weapon to become bold and impudent. Pregnant women slack off on household chores using morning sickness as an excuse and opt for easy childbirth using the baby as a reason. They would conveniently control the men because the men don't know any better. She was infuriated to find out that her son believed such an absurd story, and he had been oppressing me. I was worried that her blood pressure would rise so high and cause a stroke. He was unable to retort, just shriveled up. My mill had offered to help with postpartum care, but my husband declined, saying he would take care of me, which she initially admired as his growth. However, the reality was the opposite, and she apologized to me for not visiting, having trusted her words. I felt touched knowing she had been so concerned about me. My mill was strict but very sensible. She said that anyone who spreads falsehoods is no good colleague at all. She told him off not to believe such people. He optimistically said, as for that colleague, he was away on a business trip for a while, so there was no need to worry about it anymore. I doubted whether he truly understood, and my mill seemed to share my skepticism. She was looking down at him doubtfully. After this incident, my husband became more cooperative, and my health improved. Eventually, I was able to manage grocery shopping after visiting the triplets at the hospital. My mill still regularly came over to help and left pre-cooked meals that could be stored for later. I felt so grateful for her kindness. When the triplets came home from the hospital, she visited almost every day, reminding my husband of the importance of family. Initially, he refused to change diapers, but fearing my mill's wrath, he reluctantly started helping. He would attentively care for the children in her presence, but once she left, he would cease doing anything. His attitude became apparent even without her watching, leading him to busily search the house for hidden cameras. It was obvious to her anyway by just watching him changing diapers. However, the once tiny triplets grew up fast. Eventually, my husband gave in and only helped with diapers and feeding. Until the triplets started one for nighttime crying, he claimed he had work the next day, used earplugs, and went to sleep. This left me feeling like being a single mom. Then one day, he casually remarked, "The triplets are 1 year old now. You can handle them alone, right? The hardest part is still to come." Had he been influenced again by that same colleague? Upon further conversation, He mentioned that his female colleague who had returned from maternity leave said childcare became easier once the child turned 1. It was the same colleague who had encouraged me during my anxious first pregnancy. Would you really say something so careless? So now that you've been slacking on housework for so long, time to go full throttle. Childcare and housework are women's jobs, not for men. By the way, when are you going back to work? I didn't plan to have 3 babies. I can't feed them by myself. With these words, I was certain the colleague who had been away on business had returned and filled my husband's head with more falsehoods. He would leave his clothes around and never clean up after meals. He seemed to have regressed to the days when he expected everything to be done for him. Bath, meals, tea, with 3 toddlers moving around. I couldn't manage all the housework. I claimed that if he wanted the housework done, he needed to participate in childcare. But as I expected, he labeled it as an excuse for slacking. Moreover, his lack of interest in the children, he often left dangerous items like razors within their reach. When I pointed it out, he would scoff, saying, "I used to handle it before pregnancy." He even insisted that the one who notices should put away. This led to arguments, and in his frustration, he started ignoring me and the children. He would step over them as they lay on the floor. He could have stepped on them if they made little movement. I told him to be more careful with them, but he ignored. Because I protected the children and told him off, he became even more stubborn and sulky. I gave up, and I consulted my mill. The next morning, she came over, woke up my still sleeping husband, and took him back to her place. A few days later, they returned, and my husband looked drained. I could tell he had undergone intense re-education. He kneeled before me, half crying, apologizing. He looked quite shocked and exhausted from being scolded and beaten back by his mother. The shock seemed to stem mainly from being lectured at work about his complaints. Angry at being scolded by his mother, he had vented at the office about what a terrible wife I was. The recently returned female colleague, hearing his complaints, asked, "Triplets?" When my husband nodded, she erupted in fury. I said child care gets a bit easier at 1 year old for 1 child, not triplets. How can you leave your wife alone with 3 babies? What kind of father are you? She told him off. Even the other men in the office were astonished. It's a miracle she hasn't divorced you yet. The issue escalated, and his boss also reprimanded him severely. Rumors had spread that he was abusive towards me and the children. At the same time, the male colleague who had misled him was being fired for inappropriate behavior towards female colleagues. He had claimed to be on a business trip, but it was just a cover for dealing with his divorce. Upon returning, he was faced with a complaint filed against him, leading to police involvement. My husband, realizing the gravity of the situation after his boss declared an investigation into these rumors, finally felt a sense of crisis. His mother also warned him that if he was abandoned by his wife, she too would forsake him. Her stern words questioning his urge to push me back to work and his failure to support the family alone when he claimed to be the head made him change. I was wrong. I'll change and devote myself to my wife and children. Please don't leave me, he begged. My mill told me to tell him anything freely, but I decided to forgive him just this once. However, I made it clear one more slip, and I wouldn't forgive him. Since then, he has changed, actively engaging in housework and childcare. He even bought cooking books for simple men's recipes, and cooking on the weekends became his routine. Occasionally, my mill would drop by and announce to play with the children, and it was a huge help. By the time the triplets were old enough to go to daycare, he had learned to care for them well enough that I felt comfortable working part-time. I had to give up my full-time job to take care of my triplets. However, I plan to increase my hours and hopefully return to full-time work once they start school. If it weren't for my mill's help, we would never be able to continue as a family. I am immensely grateful for her support and hope to repay her kindness in time. My name is Clara, a 32-year-old woman who, once a firm believer in fairy tale endings, saw her life take an unexpected turn 3 years ago when I met Mark, the man who would eventually become my husband. Our story unfolds as a journey of love, trust, and eventual betrayal against the backdrop of what seemed like a perfect marriage. It all began on an ordinary Tuesday morning when fate led me to the corner cafe, a John Grisham novel in hand, lost in the world of legal thrillers. That's when Mark entered, immediately noticeable with an air of confidence and a warmth in his smile that felt inviting. "Hey, is that Grisham's latest?" he asked, nodding towards my book, his friendly voice tinged with genuine curiosity. "Yeah, just started it. He's always a good read," I responded, pleasantly surprised by the ease of our conversation. We delved into discussions about our favorite authors, and our conversation flowed effortlessly. In the weeks that followed, Mark and I grew closer. Our shared interests in music, particularly old jazz, and a mutual love for exploring hidden bookstores around the city cemented our bond. Mark was charming, respectful, and attentive, and each encounter felt like catching up with an old friend. One evening, as we walked along the river, Mark's tone turned serious. "Clara, I've never felt this way before. I think I'm falling for you," he confessed under the dim glow of the streetlights. His words sent a rush of warmth through me, and I admitted, "I feel the same, Mark. You're unlike anyone I've ever met." 6 months flew by, and our relationship only grew stronger. During a cozy dinner at my apartment, Mark proposed, and there was no hesitation in my yes. I loved him, and I believed in our future together. The joy of our engagement, however, was soon met with apprehension as the time came to meet Mark's parents. His mother, Linda, was a stern woman with piercing eyes that seemed to judge my every move, while his father was more amiable but carried an undeniable seriousness, especially regarding the institution of marriage. During a formal dinner at their house, Mark's father brought up the subject of a prenuptial agreement. "It's just practical," he stated matter-of-factly. The request caught me off guard, but given my past experience with a cheating ex-boyfriend, I understood the necessity. "I agree, but I have a condition," I said, steadying my voice. "If either of us cheats, the cheater owes the other $100,000. Mark's expression was a mix of surprise and respect. "I promise, Clara, I'd never cheat on you," he said earnestly. Our wedding was a beautiful affair, filled with laughter, dancing, and promises of forever. The first year of our marriage felt like living in a dream. We traveled to romantic destinations, enjoyed quiet evenings at home, and supported each other's ambitions. Mark was not just my husband. He was my best friend and confidant. After the whirlwind of our wedding, Mark and I settled into married life with an ease that surprised even me. Our first year was like living in a bubble of happiness, untouched by the outside world. Our honeymoon in Paris was a dream, strolling along the Seine as two lovebirds lost in a city of love. "Can you believe we're here?" I inquired of Mark one evening as we observed the Eiffel Tower lighting up. He drew me close and responded, "With you, I can believe anything. This is just the start for us, Clara." Those days were filled with laughter, romantic dinners, and promises of a shared future. Returning home with a suitcase full of memories, our bond felt unbreakable. In our daily routine, Mark would bid me farewell each morning before work, and I'd have dinner waiting for him upon his return. Our conversations stretched late into the night, discussing everything and nothing. One night, while cleaning up after dinner, Mark remarked, "You know, I never thought I'd be this happy doing mundane stuff like washing dishes." I playfully splashed water at him, and he laughed, catching it in his hands. "That's because you've got an amazing wife. It's all about good company," he said. "Absolutely the best decision of my life marrying you." Despite the growing pressure from external expectations, particularly the anticipation of starting a family, our happiness persisted. Linda, Mark's mother, would drop not-so-subtle hints at family gatherings, asking, "So when are we going to hear some good news?" I brushed it off with a joke, but her persistence strained me over time. Mark reassured me, saying, "Don't let my mom get to you. We'll start a family when we're ready, not minutes sooner." Our first year of marriage was magical, celebrated with a quiet dinner at home. Mark surprised me with a necklace I had admired months ago. "Happy anniversary, Clara. Here's to many more years of happiness," he said, his eyes shining with love. As we cuddled on the couch that night, I felt incredibly fortunate. However, as our second year of marriage began, the pressure from Mark's family, particularly Linda, took a toll. It wasn't just about starting a family. Her criticisms infiltrated every aspect of our lives. Linda's disapproval, often hidden in seemingly helpful comments, turned every visit into a nightmare. One afternoon, as I set the table for lunch, Linda walked into the kitchen, eyeing the spread with a disapproving frown. "Is this what you're serving? A bit simple, don't you think?" she remarked, her tone dripping with disdain. Clenching my jaw, I tried to maintain composure. Her critiques extended beyond my cooking, finding fault in everything from house decorations to how I spent my free time. One evening, relaxing in the living room, Linda gave her unsolicited opinion, stating, "You know, Clara, if Mark gave me the money he spends on you." I contemplated hiring a proper cleaner and cook. Mark appeared uncomfortable, but he remained silent. His quiet response felt like a betrayal, and though seething with frustration, I managed to say, "Well, Linda, I'm doing my best here." The hurt intensified as Mark's attitude began to mirror his mother's criticisms, albeit in a more subtle manner. Following one of Linda's visits, Mark casually suggested, "Mom might have a point about the house. Maybe we should consider getting some help." A pang of hurt and frustration hit me, and I questioned, "So you think I can't handle it either?" He backpedaled, saying, "No, that's not what I meant." But the damage was done. Constant criticisms and Mark's growing detachment strained our marriage, leading to arguments over trivial matters and transforming our once easy conversations into tense exchanges. After a particularly heated argument, I found myself wondering aloud, "What happened to us, Mark? We used to be on the same team." He ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated, and replied, "I don't know, Clara. Everything feels so complicated now." That night, I went to bed feeling lonely and misunderstood. Linda's insidious comments had invaded not only our home, but also our marriage, making me question whether the love Mark and I shared could withstand this constant barrage of negativity. As the third year of our marriage unfolded, a sense of unease settled in my heart. The once bright flame of our love seemed to flicker under the shadow of doubt and distrust. It all started with repeated phone calls from a name that kept popping up on Mark's phone, Jake. Mark's demeanor changed whenever that name flashed on the screen. One evening, as we watched TV, his phone rang again, and I couldn't help but notice the nervous glance he threw my way. "Who's Jake?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my heart pounded. "Just a new guy at work, no one important," Mark replied, but his voice was too nonchalant, and his answer seemed rehearsed. Mark's behavior continued to shift. He started coming home late from work with flimsy and inconsistent excuses. His wardrobe underwent a transformation, shifting from casual to sharply tailored suits. One night, as he prepared to leave for another late night at work, I questioned, "Working late again?" noticing his dressed-up appearance. "Yeah, big project," he said without meeting my eyes. "Don't wait up." Frustration boiled over, and I confronted him one day, saying, "This isn't like you, Mark. What's really going on?" My voice trembled with a mixture of anger and fear. Mark sighed, displaying a mix of guilt and annoyance. "I told you, it's just work. Why can't you trust me?" I shot back, "Because you're hiding something. You're never here, and when you are, it's like you're a million miles away." Mark didn't respond. He just grabbed his coat and left, leaving me standing there feeling more alone than ever. That night, lying in our empty bed, I made a decision. I couldn't live in this limbo of doubt and suspicion. I needed to know the truth, whatever it was. The next morning, I called a private detective. It felt like a betrayal, but the constant worry and uncertainty were eating me alive. I needed answers and was determined to get them, no matter what they revealed about the man I thought I knew. The days after contacting the private detective were a haze of anxiety and anticipation. I felt like I walked a tightrope, desperately trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy while my world quietly crumbled around me. Then the call came, shattering my last hope. "Mrs. Johnson, we have conclusive evidence. I'm afraid your suspicions were correct." The detective's voice was solemn, heavy with the weight of the news he was delivering. He explained that Mark had been having an affair, and the mysterious Jake on his phone was actually a woman. My heart sank as he detailed their meetings, providing timestamps and photos. It was irrefutable. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling a mix of devastation and vindication. My worst fears weren't just fears anymore. They were cold, hard facts. Despite the pain, I decided not to confront Mark immediately. I needed more than just the evidence of his infidelity. I needed to understand the full extent of his deceit. One evening, as I passed by his home office, I overheard a conversation that chilled me to the bone. Mark was talking to his mother, Linda. "Mom, I'm planning to end it with Clara after your birthday." Mark's voice was cold, devoid of any affection he once had for me. "Oh, that's wise, dear. Make sure she gets me a nice 65th birthday present before you drop the bomb," Linda replied, her voice laced with a callousness that took my breath away. I leaned against the wall, feeling nauseous. Not only was my husband unfaithful, but he and his mother were plotting against me, waiting to use me for one last expensive gift before discarding me. Fueled by a mixture of anger and resolve, I decided to play along. I continued as if nothing was wrong while secretly gathering more evidence of Mark's infidelity. The detective provided me with everything: photos, videos, and even audio recordings. I was building my case, preparing for the moment I would strike back. As I lay in bed each night next to the man who had betrayed me, a plan began to form in my mind. I would wait until after Linda's birthday. I would give them the illusion of victory. Let them think they had outsmarted me. But when they least expected it, I would reveal everything and turn the tables. As Linda's 65th birthday approached, I put on a mask of ignorance, acting as though everything was normal. Inside, I was a cauldron of emotions: anger, betrayal, and a fierce determination to see my plan through. A few days before the birthday, Linda casually mentioned her upcoming celebration during a family dinner. "So, Clara, I'm expecting a grand 65th birthday. You must have planned something special for me," she said with a sly smile, clearly anticipating a lavish gift. Keeping my emotions in check, I replied with faint enthusiasm, "Of course, Linda. I've arranged a dinner at the city's most luxurious restaurant. It'll be a night to remember." Her eyes lit up with glee, not realizing the trap I was setting. "How wonderful! I can't wait. Just a small family gathering, right?" she asked. "Yes, very intimate and exclusive. Just for close family," I confirmed, my words laced with hidden irony. Later that night, Mark approached me, a hint of suspicion in his voice. "That's quite a generous plan for Mom's birthday. Are you sure about this?" I looked at him, maintaining my composure. "Absolutely. It's a significant birthday, and I want to do something special for her." Mark seemed appeased, but I could tell he was puzzled by my willingness to indulge his mother. As the day of the dinner drew near, I managed the final arrangements meticulously, confirming the booking under Linda's name, double-checking the guest list, and ensuring everything was in place for the grand evening. Playing the role of the dutiful wife and daughter-in-law, I concealed my true intentions beneath a facade, ready to expose the betrayal and deceit that had corroded our marriage. The night before the dinner, as I lay in bed, a twisted sense of satisfaction enveloped me. I was mere hours away from turning the tables on Mark and Linda. They believed they were using me for one last benefit before discarding me, unaware that I held the reins of the game. The evening of Linda's 65th birthday unfolded in a luxurious restaurant, every detail meticulously planned to reflect the grandeur of the occasion. While Linda reveled in the opulence, I played the part of the gracious daughter-in-law, masking my inner turmoil with a practiced smile. As the dinner drew to a close, the waiter presented the bill, a hefty $4,500. With a steady hand, I reached for my card, my heart pounding. After swiping the card, I glanced around the table, observing Linda's satisfied smirk and Mark's uneasy expression. "Thank you for such a wonderful evening, Clara. This is truly generous," Linda said, her voice dripping with insincerity. Seizing the moment, Mark leaned in with a mocking tone. "By the way, Clara, I want a divorce." His words struck me like a physical blow, but I refused to let them see my pain. Linda chimed in sharply. "Well then, I guess you should leave. This is a family gathering after all." Without a word, I stood up and left the restaurant, my dignity intact despite the turmoil inside. As I walked away, I swiftly canceled the payment on my phone and blocked the shared account, ensuring Mark couldn't cover the cost either. Back at home, I packed my belongings quickly, the finality of my actions setting in. I was leaving this chapter of my life behind, stepping into an uncertain but hopeful future. Soon, my phone erupted with calls. I answered, and Linda's voice, shrill with rage and panic, filled my ears. The payment didn't go through. The restaurant staff called the police. "What have you done?" Her words were a cacophony of anger and disbelief, but I remained silent, letting her tirade wash over me. This was their doing, their betrayal and manipulation coming back to haunt them. After hanging up, I looked around the empty house, once filled with dreams and love, now just a hollow shell. I took a deep breath, stepped out the door, and didn't look back. Their calls continued, desperate pleas for help that I no longer felt obliged to answer. I had closed that chapter of my life for good. In the end, they paid. Mark had to borrow from his parents, but I didn't care where the money came from. It was a small compensation for the betrayal, but more importantly, it was closure. Sitting in the lawyer's office, signing the last of the papers, I felt a sense of peace. The journey had been painful, full of betrayal and heartache. But I had come out stronger, more resilient. Walking out into the sunlight, I felt like a free woman ready to start anew. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. After all the darkness, I finally felt like I was stepping into the light. I initiated the divorce proceedings, deeming a financially struggling spouse to be of little value. My world was shaken when, during a business trip, my husband abruptly declared not only his intent to divorce, but also his simultaneous marriage to his lover. To add insult to injury, he accused me of marrying him solely for his wealth and demanded I forfeit any claims to our property. Confronting my indifferent husband, who had always treated me with disdain since our marriage, led to his unraveling and a downward spiral to rock bottom. I am Karen, 35 years old, raised by a single mother since my father's passing in kindergarten. Despite the financial challenges, we found happiness as a family of 3. Even as an adult with a decent salary, my frugal habits persisted from childhood. I married John, a wealthy man I met through an acquaintance, drawn to his kindness and the new world he presented. Our differing views on money and gender roles emerged after marriage. While John envisioned a traditional household, I was dedicated to my career and financial independence. Before marriage, John suggested I become a homemaker, assuming I would embrace traditional domestic roles. However, I expressed my desire to continue working until we had children, emphasizing the financial benefits. Although I managed to convince him, the reality of balancing work and household chores proved challenging. Despite being a full-time employee, my days were consumed with domestic responsibilities, leaving little time for us as a couple. In contrast, John, adopting a traditional husband role, contributed nothing to household tasks. While he witnessed my busy schedule, he simply indulged in dinner and relaxation upon returning home. Balancing work and domestic responsibilities took a toll on our relationship, prompting me to question if this was the essence of a marriage. Despite my efforts, I hesitated to voice my dissatisfaction. Fearing he might insist I quit my job despite his lack of contribution at home. I had hoped that the arrival of children would bring about a positive change in our relationship. Unfortunately, our connection had grown distant, casting doubt on the possibility of expanding our family. Feeling the urgency to discuss this matter, I approached John. "Hey, we should start considering having kids, right? Ha! Kids? You're quite energetic, considering you're tired from work and chores. It's not about that. I want to have children. We haven't been married that long, but I'm already over 30. Women have a limited time to have children, and it's getting harder for me to conceive as I get older. It's almost too late. But we don't need kids. If we have one, you'll expect me to help, right? You know I'm busy with work, and I won't help with child rearing. Declaring you won't help with child rearing even before they're born is strange, isn't it? I plan to raise them alone, but shouldn't you at least have the intention to help? It's your child too. Child rearing is your job. I'm working to support the family, so I definitely won't help with the kids. You'll just complain that I don't help, making me the bad guy. You must have been indoctrinated with poverty and lots of kids since birth. We're not poor. We don't need kids. End of discussion. John abruptly ended the conversation, retreating to his room. Alone in the living room, tears overwhelmed me. My desire for children was not only rejected, but my upbringing was also mocked. Following this incident, our relationship deteriorated rapidly. Communication became scarce, and the possibility of having children seemed more distant. As I continued to juggle work and home responsibilities, taking on significant projects at work, I found myself increasingly distant from John. One day, when informing him about an upcoming business trip, his unexpected kindness surprised me. He wished me well and hinted at a big surprise upon my return. Despite having given up on him, his smile shook my resolve. However, my faint hope was shattered upon returning home. The front door wouldn't open, and John revealed the first surprise. He had changed the locks. The second surprise was the announcement of our divorce. He claimed to have forged my signature and submitted the papers with a friend as a witness. Inside, he presented a document for me to sign, waiving my rights to property division. Protesting the false accusations, I insisted on a mutual renunciation of property rights, intending to make it a public document. John, stubbornly retorting, redid the document on his computer, initiating a tense exchange. As I left the house, he continued to scorn me for being poor, even contemplating discarding my belongings. A few days later, John, in a state of panic, called me, wondering what I had done. "What do you mean I haven't done anything? Why are you panicking?" "I have a lot of questions. First, I was told to leave the apartment." "Oh, you were still living there. That's not allowed. It's a new month. You're trespassing." "Trespassing? But it's my house. Are you okay? Did you forget that it was a company apartment I rented? I was the leaseholder, so naturally, you can't live there anymore." "That's ridiculous. How could you do this? I can't believe you didn't know. I'm not the one who should be accused of doing things on my own. Didn't I tell you that you can't just change the locks of a rental apartment? It's my house. I can change the locks if I want. Didn't you listen? It was my leased apartment. Even if you were the leaseholder, the owner is the apartment manager. You can't change the locks without informing them." "Is that so? Also, I terminated the lease while you changed the locks. I was allowed to live there until this month. I was planning to return, but now you've unlawfully altered someone else's property, which could be criminal damage. Wait, why did you terminate it so early?" "Criminal damage? Is that why the police are at the front door now? I'm too scared to open it." But I calmly replied, "So the police did come. Don't worry, it's probably not for trespassing or criminal damage. It's better to talk to them." "Why do I know about the police?" "Because I reported you for filing the divorce papers yourself. It seems like you've committed crimes like forgery and fraudulent use of a private document. Divorce papers can be filed by one person, but only with mutual agreement and personal signatures. Since John forged my signature and the witness, it's obvious that it's a crime." But he seemed unaware of his guilt. I continued pressing further. "So the divorce papers you submitted are invalid, and your marriage with Susan can't happen either." "How do you know about Susan? Did you think I knew nothing? I had a private detective agency thoroughly investigate your affair with Susan. It was a busy time at work, and coordinating with the agency was tough. Plus, you even held a grand wedding ceremony while I was supposedly on a business trip. Are you okay? Your business trip was a lie. Yes, I took leave from work despite being busy to do some research and prepare documents. I knew about you bringing Susan home. It would have been impossible to gather this evidence while working. After I revealed everything, John was speechless and seemed quite downcast even over the phone. Then he pleaded with me, "Please don't tell Susan I'm divorced." Why would I? There's no such fact to tell. Really? Thank you. Are you misunderstanding something? When did you become divorced? That fake divorce paper is invalid, remember? So legally, you're still my husband, not divorced. What? So since you committed adultery, well, legally, my husband, Susan needs to pay compensation. I sent the demand for reparation to her house yesterday by express delivery. She didn't know you were married, right? Then I can't withdraw the claim at this point. I already knew Susan believed John was single, but I deliberately sent the reparation demand. Susan hasn't contacted me yet, so maybe she hasn't received the letter. It should arrive soon. Should you be on the phone with me when you also have to deal with the police? You're busy? I'll ignore the police. I won't be arrested. I'm going to Susan's house now to get the letter back before she or her family can accept it. He then hung up. He probably went straight to Susan's house to wait for the postman at the front door. I knew it would be futile because the letter was sent as registered mail to Susan only. Even if he waited for the postman, he couldn't receive it. A few hours later, a dispirited John called me. According to him, there was an incident when the postman arrived. Finally, I'll take that envelope. Who are you? You don't live here, right? I'm practically a resident here since I'm married. I have the right to receive the mail. I see, but I can't give you this envelope. It's registered mail for Susan only. What? Give it to me. Absolutely not. If you're so eager, ask Susan for permission. What's going on here? Oh, John, what's all this noise? What's happening? Ah, Susan, this is registered mail for you. This man insisted on taking it. Sorry for the disturbance. Now I'll be on my way. What's this? A demand for reparation. John, you are married. What's going on here? Sorry, it's just, she's an ex-wife from a long time ago. I was embarrassed to say I'm divorced. I'm sorry for keeping it secret. But it's strange, isn't it? We haven't been dating long, and a demand for reparation? If you were divorced before we started dating, there shouldn't be any problem, right? Well, my ex-wife is crazy. Maybe she's demanding reparation out of spite because I got married. That was the excuse he gave, but such a lie was quickly exposed. The envelope included a letter I wrote along with my contact information, so Susan called me directly. In that call, I told her about the affair, the invalid divorce, and that they had a wedding ceremony while he was still married to me. Although they had a wedding ceremony, they hadn't submitted the marriage registration yet. John wanted to submit it on April Fool's Day, so it was still pending. He probably delayed submitting the marriage registration due to uncertainty about whether the divorce was finalized. After being exposed, John fled from Susan's house and shamelessly contacted me again. I still had something to tell him, so we agreed to meet at a nearby cafe. As soon as I arrived, John said, "Karen, please withdraw the reparation claim. Let's pretend we've been separated for a long time and officially divorced now. I can apologize to Susan for being secretly divorced and maybe cover it up. You think I'm desperate to stay married to you. I was going to file for divorce anyway, but since you cheated, you'll pay reparation. Just trying to extort money from me, huh? Typical of the poor. You have such a poor heart. You're talking nonsense. Depending on my answer, everything can change. There's still an option where we don't divorce. If I say no, you can't reject it, meaning you can't marry Susan, and your marital status will be exposed. Fine, I'll pay the reparation. Just divorce me now. Sign here. Then, about property division. Property division? How much more do you want to take from me? Reparation should be enough. Remember, we agreed to waive property division, right? So let's make it official. All right. You're not as bad as I thought. Thank you. We then went to a public notary, made a public document for reparation and property division, and then to the city hall to submit the divorce papers, finalizing our divorce. Relieved, I exchanged final words with John. Glad we don't have to divide property. What are you saying? I'm the one who benefits from that. By the way, do you even have assets after paying me reparation? Susan will also claim damages. She mentioned charging you for the wedding expenses. That's impossible. I'm marrying Susan. She can't claim that. We're divorced now, so there should be no problem. Still living in a fantasy. You committed marriage fraud. You had a wedding while still married. You think Susan still believes you? Marriage fraud? That's ridiculous. Susan will believe me. Believe that if you want. I heard from Susan directly. Also, weren't the guests at your wedding paid actors? You still owe them. You knew about that. I haven't paid them yet. What does it matter to you? You could have just taken property division and been better off. That's what I wanted to tell you. Even if we had divided property, you would have benefited more. What are you talking about, poor woman? Your family is poor, and you only make $15,000 a year, right? Even if you got a raise, it would be barely $20,000. You don't have any property. You keep calling me poor, so I thought you might be mistaken. Yes, my salary is indeed $15,000, but you know I work for a foreign company, right? It seems you have no interest in me, but I became a director of the American branch. It's not $115,000 per year, but per month. $155,000 per month. So that's an annual income of $1.8 million. You're still bad with numbers. How do you manage to keep a job? It's $180,000 a year. $180,000? That can't be true. Of course, I haven't had the chance to spend such an amount, so I've been saving it for the future. The savings from before our marriage aren't part of the property division, but there's still a considerable amount since our marriage. So I could have received half of that in the property division. You are my destiny after all. I'll get the divorce papers corrected. Are you okay? After all the contempt, you think I'd gladly undo the divorce if you have that much money. You don't need to claim reparation, right? It's just a small amount for you. He who laughs at 1 cent will weep for 1 cent. This reparation is for the mental anguish you caused me. I'd like to claim more honestly. And since we've made it official, make sure to pay it even in installments. I'll be penniless. Also, don't go back to that apartment. Your belongings should have been moved to your parents' house by now. You thought I had few belongings, but that was because I had already moved. Most of them were. Were you that indifferent to me? I can't have so little. So I have to go back to my parents' house. They don't know anything yet, do they? Let me explain. Don't say anything. I've already told them everything. It's only right to explain why we're divorcing. Oh, and your father said, don't ever step over our threshold again, so I have nowhere to go. He collapsed, and I left the cafe. Later, I heard he caused trouble at the police station. Despite my advice, he went back to the apartment. He sat there aimlessly in the empty apartment until the manager called the police, and he was taken away. I'm not sure if it was for obstructing public duties, trespassing, or for the falsified divorce papers. Eventually, his parents took responsibility for him. After talking with me and learning about Susan, they decided that apologizing and paying damages to Susan's family came first. They went to Susan's house to apologize, kneeling in front of her family. They settled everything without pressing charges for marriage fraud, even paying for the wedding expenses. I had expected them to sue, so it was disappointing they didn't. So, I decided to pursue legal action against him for forging the divorce papers. John offered a settlement, but I didn't withdraw the lawsuit. I didn't want him to think everything could be solved with money. I wanted him to be convicted and understand the gravity of his actions, even if it cost time and money. I left everything to my lawyer, so it wasn't too burdensome for me. Even though it took time, John, exposed for his actions and the marriage fraud at his company, couldn't stay there anymore. After being detained by the police and subsequently absent without leave. He was eventually fired. He ended up living at his parents' home, working all day at a relative's construction company. His father took all his earnings, leaving him with no income. I thought his parents wouldn't abandon him, but they were stricter than I expected. They paid my reparation and Susan's compensation, planning to make him work like a horse until he repaid everything. He lived in a shed-like place with no electricity, receiving only $5 per day for food, deducted from his salary. They plan to disown and kick him out once he's repaid everything. A harsh fate after years of hard work. I was offered a position at the head office abroad, so I moved overseas after the divorce was finalized. I worried John might come to me for help or harbor resentment, but moving abroad alleviated those concerns. I thought work would be my partner for a while, but soon I found a new relationship. I'm now dating a foreign executive at our head office, and I'm pregnant with plans to marry soon. I told him everything about my past and my ex-husband, and he's understanding. I'll take maternity leave and plan to return to work later, supported by him. He's enthusiastic about taking paternity leave and co-parenting, showing a different cultural perspective. After being tormented by my ex-husband, I finally feel I'm grasping true happiness and confidence in building the happy family I always dreamed of. Many suffered due to selfish spouses, and while divorce isn't always the right choice, enduring silence isn't a virtue. It's important to know that honest discussions can lead to resolutions, and sometimes divorce is a necessary option. I'm Maria Dalton, about to turn 27 this year, and I've been happily married for 5 years. My son, Martin, just celebrated his 4th birthday. Initially, I worked full-time after tying the knot, but now I balance part-time work at the same company. My husband, Kevin, is 30 years old, 3 years my senior. Our journey from dating to marriage was initiated by Kevin's passionate advances, but post-marriage, I observed a shift in his demeanor towards a more domineering side. Kevin has a 20-year-old sister named Jane Dalton, and their age gap seems to contribute to a somewhat indulgent relationship on Kevin's part. Before marriage, I didn't mind Jane's frequent visits and assumed they got along well. However, after tying the knot, I started noticing changes in her behavior. Jane often drops by unannounced, at any time, and expects to be served without ever bringing a token of appreciation. Kevin, rather than addressing the situation, expects me to accommodate her demands. Jane acts as though I'm invisible, addressing only Kevin with a casual "brother, I'm here again." Despite not preparing for an additional guest, I end up serving dinner to Jane. Kevin, instead of understanding, blames me aloud, insisting I should have been more considerate. Despite Jane's verbal apologies, it's evident she relishes Kevin's preferential treatment. Left with leftovers, I prepare my own meal while Kevin and Jane continue their chat on the sofa, leaving the dining table messy. They never acknowledge Martin or me, treating us more like hired help than family. One evening, as I'm about to take a bath with Martin, Kevin interrupts, loudly instructing me to buy a cake for Jane. Despite it being late, Jane insists on having it immediately. Kevin blames me for delaying, and, feeling compelled, I reluctantly head to the cake shop with Martin in tow. Overhearing their conversation, I learn they're criticizing me for being inconsiderate and questioning the decision to marry me. Meanwhile, Martin, though unable to grasp the words, senses tension in our relationship. Suppressing my emotions, I ask him about his cake preference, and he cheerfully requests one with lots of fruits. Our trip to the cake shop was filled with discussions about cakes, momentarily pushing aside Kevin's earlier words. Martin and I arrived just before closing time, fortunately finding the cake Jane desired. We purchased 2 cakes, including the fruit-loaded one Martin wanted. Back home, I served the cakes to Jane and Kevin, then prepared Martin's cake and headed to the dining room. The moment I placed it in front of Martin, Jane pointed and expressed her desire for that cake. Before I could react, Kevin moved Martin's chosen cake in front of Jane, disregarding Martin's protests. Kevin justified his action, claiming he bought the cake with his earnings and had the right to choose for Martin. Unable to contain my emotions any longer, I voiced my dissatisfaction. In response, Kevin threatened with divorce. Martin, who had stopped crying, anxiously held my hand and then, after some thought, said, "Mom, I'd also love cake with strawberries on it. Yes, it's really delicious." He mentioned this while eating a cake initially wanted by Jane. Feeling that Martin was enduring too much, I lifted his cake plate when I saw Jane reaching for it. I took Martin to the next room so he could enjoy his cake in peace. Kevin apologized to Jane, claiming he was sorry for being stingy. Despite wanting to retort, I held back for Martin's sake. Watching Martin innocently enjoy his cake was a heartwarming sight. After finishing the cake, we decided to have a late bath and sleep in Martin's bed. The next morning, I discovered Jane had already left. As I prepared breakfast, I heard Martin crying. Shockingly, his piggy bank, a gift from my father, was broken, and the saved money was gone. Martin, who always said goodnight to the piggy bank, was left heartbroken. When I questioned Kevin about it, he casually mentioned that Jane needed some money, so she took it from the piggy bank. Holding a crying and shaken Martin, I felt his pain so acutely that I cried with him. It was painful to witness Kevin prioritizing and caring for his sister more than our son. Expressing my anger and sadness, I confronted Kevin, breaking my usual silence on arguments in front of Martin. Kevin, without a word, went to the bedroom and returned with something shocking in hand: divorce papers. I discovered the hidden divorce papers that Kevin had tucked away somewhere I didn't know. In a sudden burst, he confronted me, shoving the papers at me before storming out of the house with a loud bang. Martin, who had never cried over the issues with Kevin and Jane, seemed to have reached his limit, crying since last night. Unable to bear seeing Martin so hurt, I suggested skipping daycare for the day, and he happily agreed with a loud yes, showing a faint smile. We spent the day playing and bonding, with Martin bringing a picture book from the shelf, sitting on my lap, and happily remarking, "The teacher at the nursery today was Mama, right? He looks like an angel." His little heart seemed filled with patience, and I decided to make the day special by taking a day off from work. Despite causing potential trouble at my workplace, they kindly understood the situation and granted me a day off. In the morning, we visited the park, played hide and seek, and had fun in the sandbox and on the slide. When we returned home for lunch, Martin appeared sleepy, usually napping by himself. But today he fell asleep on my lap like when he was a baby. Though I initially thought of doing household chores during his nap, I decided that today was special. Instead, I allowed myself to be healed by his peaceful sleeping face and gentle breathing. However, my serene moment was abruptly interrupted by a noise from the entrance, indicating the front door had opened. As it wasn't Kevin's usual time to come home, I became suspicious and quickly hid in the bedroom closet, clutching Martin. A voice echoed through the house, and to my surprise, it was Jane. Trembling with fear, I listened as she searched for something, expressing frustration over not finding it. Jane then made a phone call, mentioning Kevin and discussing their unsuccessful search. After hearing her lock the front door and leave, I put Martin to bed and contemplated the strange events. I couldn't comprehend why Jane had entered the house and what they were looking for. Suddenly, Kevin seemed like a stranger, and I felt a mix of disgust and fear towards him. Swiftly packing essentials for Martin and myself, we headed to the station and took a train to my parents' house. Fortunately, their home was nearby, just 2 stations away. Although I hadn't contacted them beforehand, my parents sensed something from my expression and welcomed us without asking questions. I shared the entire ordeal with them, including my fear of staying at our house due to Kevin and Jane's actions. Upon hearing my mother's suggestion that Jane might have been looking for my belongings, possibly cash cards, I recalled my past experience as a successful CEO in the handmade goods industry. I had entrusted the company to friends when I decided to prioritize raising my child after getting married. Although I still worked part-time and communicated with the company from home, Kevin was unaware that I was still the CEO. I discovered the hidden divorce papers that Kevin had tucked away, suspecting that he thought I had a decent amount of savings. While I've mentioned to him that I still receive some assistance from the company, I've deliberately kept the details about being the CEO and my savings private. This secrecy stems from realizing early in our marriage that Kevin struggles with managing money and tends to spend everything he earns. Kevin, at first, provided only $200 a month for food expenses and even suggested I quit my job to become a full-time housewife. However, with the financial strain of raising Martin and only $200 for food, I never agreed to be a full-time housewife. Eventually, he reluctantly allowed me to work part-time, and to ensure I wouldn't consider divorce, he had me sign a post-marital property waiver through a lawyer. Since Martin's birth, I used my savings for his nursery fees and clothes, as I've only received $200 for food. I've never asked Kevin for additional funds beyond the food budget, leading him to believe I have savings. Considering Jane's apparent need for money and Kevin's perception of my financial situation, they might be searching for my cash cards. I have a separate savings account dedicated to Martin, with a portion of my salary directly deposited into it each month. Despite their search, they won't find the cash cards, as I always carry my valuables. However, there's still an unsettling issue. Jane might be entering our house even when we're not there, and Kevin may be allowing it. Following my father's advice, I decided to store my valuables, including the cash cards, in my parents' safe. As I pondered their need for money, Martin approached my father, crying over his broken piggy bank and the shattered promise of saving up. My father, angered by Martin's story, vowed to call Kevin. My mother suggested finding out their purpose calmly, as Kevin's mention of divorce might shift blame to us, making the divorce more favorable for him. To ascertain their purpose, I decided to record their conversation, consulting a lawyer who was a friend of my father's. Returning home, I began cooking dinner, keeping my phone screen down to record secretly. Kevin arrived home, surprising me by immediately asking about my cash cards. When I questioned him, he gave vague answers, attempting to deceive me. When I remained silent, Kevin grew agitated and demanded all my part-time money for his sister. Refusing, I explained it was from Martin's savings. In response, he angrily pushed the signed divorce papers toward me, declaring that I was living off his money and didn't need to save for Martin. He even uttered words implying he valued Jane more than our son. Hearing this, I stopped preparing the meal, put the divorce papers in my bag, took Martin's hand, and headed for the door. Kevin, in a loud voice, declared his serious intent for divorce, instructing me never to come back. I responded by stating I wouldn't return to a house where a stranger could come and go freely. After leaving, I received numerous messages and calls from Kevin, which I ignored. Turning off my phone, I sought refuge at my parents' house, sharing the recording and divorce papers with them. Although I confessed to having no love or affection for Kevin, I expressed concern for Martin. My parents advised me to do as I pleased, acknowledging the potential emotional impact on Martin if a divorce were to occur. While grappling with the decision to divorce Kevin, Martin expressed his hunger. My mother, seeing my distress, kindly made him hamburgers, his favorite dish. Overwhelmed with emotions, tears welled up in my eyes as my mother told Martin with a warm smile that she prepared the hamburgers so that he and I could visit whenever we wanted. Taking a bite, Martin exclaimed with joy, praising Grandma's hamburgers and expressing a desire to eat them every day. I responded, saying it's because the hamburger contains the love I have for him, and he, in a touching gesture, took a big bite and offered it to me. Moved by Martin's kindness, my tears couldn't be held back, and even though I tried to stop them, they persisted. My father, noticing Martin's concern, reassured him that my tears were of happiness, not sadness. Hearing this, Martin, in a moment of understanding, hugged me, and my father's eyes turned bright red. Realizing the blessing of being with family, I remarked to Martin that family is precious. Surprised, he questioned if Dad had mentioned that only Jane was family. My father gently confirmed it, but then asked Martin if he wanted to live with them as family. With a laugh, Martin happily agreed, making everyone smile naturally. Despite contemplating divorce, the meal felt so happy that I finally decided to part ways with Kevin. I planned to inform Martin about it, and even though discussing it weighed heavily on my heart, Martin seemed to grasp the situation. Happily, he expressed the desire to live as a family, embracing the pet dog and calling him his younger brother despite the dog being older. Preparations for the divorce began, starting with contacting a lawyer who was a friend of my father. The next day, we formalized the contract, and my father and Martin shared comforting laughter while I laid in bed, reminiscing about my childhood. The following day, upon checking my smartphone, I found over 200 calls and messages from Kevin, showcasing his emotional instability. Exhausted, I turned off my phone, and with the lawyer's assistance, we explained the situation to my parents. Jane had accumulated significant debt from a casino and shopping addiction, and Kevin acted as her guarantor, planning to use my savings. The lawyer confirmed that the divorce papers had already been submitted, and Kevin sobbed upon realizing it was finalized. Despite expecting disagreements about child support, he signed a pledge to pay $340 to Martin every month. In a subsequent call from Kevin, his tone lacked aggression, and he calmly admitted to financial manipulation and explained his complex feelings toward Jane. I firmly asserted my decision not to reconsider and heard his faint sobbing before he wished me happiness and hung up. Remaining strong until the end, I discussed future plans with my parents and decided to stay with them until Martin grows up. I resumed my role as a company president and later learned that Kevin and Jane had informed their parents about the divorce and debt, resulting in disownement. Today, I find happiness being with my family. I'm all set for life, marrying into wealth. While you continue to struggle in your modest existence, Bob jeered with a smirk, throwing condescending words my way. His shrill voice pierced the air, disrupting my relaxing break in the hotel lobby. I wondered where he had met his new wife, a president's daughter, no less. Julie, the daughter of Johnson Enterprises. Bob, with his middle-aged man's laugh, seemed oddly proud, but the mention of Johnson Enterprises caught my attention. It sounded familiar. But which company was it? Ah, yes. I recalled the details about Johnson Enterprises, and a proud smile spread across Bob's face. Meanwhile, I struggled to suppress a laugh bubbling up inside me. My name is Amy. I'm 35 and living with my husband, Bob. I work in my family's real estate business, handling mostly administrative tasks. My father, the president, manages the key business strategies. Being an only child, I'm expected to eventually take over the company. With older executives at the helm, I feel the pressure of one day becoming the president. However, I've been careful not to discuss much about our family business with Bob, who only finished high school and works in a moving company. I don't want to bring work matters home, and Bob, feeling somewhat inferior, avoids the topic. Of course, moving is a tough job requiring physical strength and skill, a job for professionals. I don't mind that he only has a high school diploma, but I understand his feelings, so I avoid mentioning my prestigious university degree or my future role as president in our daily conversations. Bob and I met through a friend's introduction in college. My friend had hired Bob's moving company, and he was in charge of her move. Initially interested in my friend, Bob was turned down, but they got along, so she introduced him to me. Our unusual meeting turned out well, as Bob's carefree nature was a good match for my meticulous personality. After several dates, we became a couple in my late 20s, and at the right age for marriage, our relationship quickly led to marriage within a year. Thus began my life as Bob's wife. Our married life started without any issues. Bob's parents were incredibly kind, always welcoming me with smiles during our visits. Considering the common mother-in-law issues among my friends, I felt lucky to have such a harmonious relationship with my in-laws. However, Bob's demanding job often kept him out until late, physically taxing and leaving him exhausted. Despite his fatigue, he never neglected our marital life. While appreciative, I often thought he didn't need to try so hard. Thanks for always waiting up for me. Bob would thank me for simply preparing dinner after his long workdays. I felt blessed to have such a wonderful husband, but our peaceful days began to waver a year into our marriage. Hey, why can't we have kids? One night as we got into bed, Bob casually brought up the subject, his tone slightly irritated. It took me by surprise. I had thought about having children too, and although we weren't actively trying, given our regular marital life, I believed it would happen in time. It's just bad timing. We've only been married a year, so it's not something to worry about yet. I reassured him. I definitely wanted children, but knew that rushing wouldn't help. To reassure Bob, I deliberately adopted a relaxed tone and said, "It's still okay, huh? Don't you know for couples not using contraception, there's about an 80% chance of conceiving within a year?" Bob, more forceful than usual, even quoted percentages, 80% within a year. Not well versed in pregnancy statistics, that number seemed incredibly high to me. Really? If you're that eager for kids, should we get tested together? I thought it best to identify and address any clear issues. I proposed that both of us undergo fertility tests, but Bob's response caught me off guard. "What are you talking about? Are you implying it's my fault?" Infertility issues are usually the woman's fault. There's no point in me getting tested. Bob's contemptuous tone, a first for him, stunned me. I hadn't accused him of being the cause. I simply suggested testing since we didn't know where the issue lay yet. However, Bob jumped to the conclusion that I was blaming him and added, "It's definitely the woman's fault," as if to say I was the problem. I wanted to say more, but I was shaking, barely able to reply. Of course, I managed to say, "So just you get tested. I'm too busy with work. I have a job too. You're just a placeholder office lady, right? Just coasting along in a company thanks to your dad's connections." I never just coast at my company. Sure, I do a lot of administrative work now, but I'm also learning management skills from my father for when I take over the company. I'm constantly trying to prove myself, and it's tough dealing with the higher-ups. Bob just doesn't understand my struggles. That night, it seemed pointless to argue with him. Any word I said was met with sharp retorts, and we went to sleep back to back in a heavy atmosphere. From that day on, Bob's attitude towards me changed completely. "I'm home." "What? Dinner's not ready yet? What time do you think it is? Can't have kids. Can't do housework. What a useless wife." One evening, after a late talk with my father about the future, I came home to find Bob berating me for not having dinner ready. "I'm sorry, I just got home 10 minutes ago. I'll start cooking now." "Just wait a little, please," I hurriedly explained. Bob muttered, "That's typical of a small company's boss's daughter." He didn't know, but my father's real estate company was not small at all, with hundreds of employees. But I knew arguing this point was meaningless. "I'll cook right away, have a drink, and wait." Bob loved his alcohol. It seemed to calm him down. Relying on alcohol to maintain our relationship felt sad. I hated being berated by him, but if alcohol could soothe him even a bit, then it was worth it. The next morning, Bob's mood hadn't improved. "Make sure dinner's ready when I get home," he spat as he left. I sighed, thinking about my plans for the day. I had taken the day off to visit the gynecologist for fertility testing, as previously mentioned by Bob. Although I was the one who initially suggested the testing, the fact that only I was undergoing it while Bob refused was something I found hard to accept. But complaining wouldn't change anything. If the issue was with me, I needed to start infertility treatment promptly. Bob had been wanting kids, and I too hoped for a child soon. I knew fertility rates differ between the 20s and 30s, so sooner was better for treatment. The clinic was busier than expected, and I was called in for examination an hour after registration. After undergoing a physical examination and blood tests, I was told that the results would be available during my next visit. It would be a shock if the issue was with me, but I was prepared for any necessary steps, no matter the outcome. I resolved not to lose heart. "Bob, I went for the fertility test today." When Bob came home from work, I informed him about the test. "Huh, figures. If the problem's with you, testing's the right thing to do. Let me know the results as soon as you get them," he said. Bob's belief that I was the cause of our infertility frustrated me. The fertility testing required much time and effort, and a bit of understanding from him would have been welcome. 5 years passed, and I turned 35. Though we continued our efforts to conceive, we remained childless, and Bob seemed to have given up on having a child with me. His late nights increased, and sometimes he didn't come home at all. When asked, he said he was out drinking with colleagues, then singing karaoke till morning. His behavior was more akin to a college student and deeply exasperated me. My work had become busier, and the thought of starting a family was pushed aside. But Bob's recent actions were too much. His lack of concern for our home life was clear. One day, after Bob went out on his day off, I observed that he had left his smartphone in the living room, forgetting to take it with him. With that realization, I picked up Bob's phone, intending to take it to his room. It was at that moment that his phone rang, an incoming call from a certain Julie, as indicated by the caller ID. Assuming it was a work contact, I answered to inform them that Bob had forgotten his phone at home. "Hey, Bob, you're late. I've been waiting for 30 minutes. Where are you? If you don't hurry, we'll miss the park opening." The flirty voice on the phone made me catch my breath. "Can you hear me? Hurry up, okay? We haven't had a date in so long." The mention of a date shook me, and I quickly ended the call. My heart wouldn't stop racing. Who was this woman? She mentioned a date, so she likely wasn't a colleague. He's cheating on me. Holding undeniable proof of Bob's infidelity, I clenched his phone tightly. Julie had said it was a long-awaited date, indicating a long-term affair. I trembled with indescribable anger. While I was struggling with infertility, Bob was carelessly cheating on me. His recent distance now made sense. He no longer needed me. Unforgivable. Determined to make Bob pay, I started collecting evidence of his infidelity. It wasn't hard to gather proof. First, I easily unlocked his smartphone using his birth date. The call history was filled with Julie's name. When I opened the messaging app, I found numerous messages between Bob and Julie, filled with embarrassingly affectionate words that made me feel nauseated. I took photos of these pieces of evidence with my phone. After placing Bob's phone back in his room, I spent the day as if nothing had happened. After a month of a strange marriage, my father, the company president, summoned me to his office. "I have something important to discuss with you," he said gravely. Shocked by his words, I couldn't believe what I heard. "Is that true?" I asked. "Yes, so I'm counting on you." Disturbed, I returned to my office, barely concentrating on work. That evening, Bob suggested we separate. Having found evidence of his affair, I had been contemplating when to bring up divorce, but him initiating it saved me the hassle. "Yes, let's divorce." "Really?" Because I had readily accepted the divorce, Bob seemed surprised. Perhaps he was happy about being able to be with his mistress, a woman named Julie. His face was filled with an unmistakable joy that I found irritating. Despite my irritation with Bob's expression, I signed the divorce papers he offered. "I can file these tomorrow. I'll be leaving this house." "Okay. Are you sure about the mortgage?" I anticipated he would want me to leave, so I casually asked. "Oh yes, I'm fine." Bob's job was demanding but not high-paying. I doubted he could handle the mortgage alone. But since he initiated the divorce and was the one cheating, I felt no obligation to help. I packed and left the house 3 days later, moving back to my parents' house nearby. My parents initially seemed concerned when I told them about my divorce, but when I explained that Bob had cheated on me, they became furious. They repeatedly reassured me that it was the right decision to part ways with such a man. I threw myself into work, trying to forget about Bob. Before I realized it, a year had flown by. I was so engrossed in my work that I lost sight of everything else. It was astonishing. One day, while relaxing in the living room, my dad approached me. "Why don't you take a break and go on a trip? It's going to get busy starting next month." Guess he thought I'd been working too hard and needed a distraction. Indeed, I had been overwhelmed with various things lately and felt mentally exhausted. Thinking a little trip wouldn't hurt, I took up Dad's suggestion and decided to travel to the Northeast. It was my first solo trip, and I was both nervous and excited. The air in the Northeast was crisp and seemed to cleanse my weary soul. Interacting with the locals who helped me navigate and chatting with the owner of a bar, I found everyone to be incredibly kind, which gradually healed my spirit. I had booked a hotel in Seattle, the most famous and largest around here, thinking, why not enjoy the trip to the fullest? After checking in, I relaxed in the lobby with a welcome drink. The fatigue from the journey seemed to melt away, feeling utterly comfortable. Jokingly considering moving to Seattle, a familiar voice called out, "Ha! Hey, what are you doing here?" I spun around, startled by the unmistakable voice of my ex-husband, Bob, entering the lobby with 2 large suitcases and a young woman in her early 20s. She had flawless skin, bold makeup, and striking red nails, despite the chilly Northeast weather. Wearing a short skirt with bare legs, I stared at Bob and the woman in disbelief, unable to contain my curiosity. "Why are you here, and who is she?" I blurted out, even though I wasn't sure if I wanted to know. "Oh, let me introduce you. This is Julie, my new wife. We're on our honeymoon. Guess what?" "She's a wealthy businessman's daughter," Bob exclaimed, appearing genuinely happy and volunteering information I hadn't asked for. However, the name Julie struck a chord, the same name as the person on the phone. Disgusted that he was with such a young girl, I felt a surge of discomfort. "You're on a solo trip here. That's pathetic," Bob sneered, despite being the one who cheated and initiated our divorce. Julie, too, was looking at me with narrowed eyes, her tone carrying amusement. "Hey, Bob, is this your ex-wife? She looks old. Hurry up with the check-in." Irritated by her catty tone, I glared at Julie. Bob nonchalantly wrapped an arm around her waist, responding, "Yeah, I'm set for life marrying into money. You can keep struggling in your poor life." Bob's high-pitched voice echoed through the hotel lobby, disrupting the elegant atmosphere I was enjoying and leaving me feeling upset. His mention of marrying a businessman's daughter made me wonder where he had met someone like that. "Yeah, Julie is the daughter of Johnson Enterprises," Bob proudly stated, his middle-aged laugh seeming childishly proud to me. I pondered, feeling that Johnson Enterprises sounded familiar. After a moment, I recalled it. "Oh, right, that company." Bob's face lit up with pride. "Impressive, huh?" he explained. However, I was secretly holding back laughter inside. "Come on, you know this company. Her family's loaded, and they even paid off the mortgage on that house quickly. Thanks for divorcing me so easily, Amy." His tone was dripping with sarcasm, but it didn't bother me at all. "Yeah, I know them. They're in the biggest building downtown, right? I've seen it and even been there," I replied calmly. "Oh, you've been there?" Bob seemed surprised. "It's quick then. Her family owns a huge company, so they're loaded. Breaking up with you was the right choice." Bob smirked nastily, but I simply nodded, still calm. "That building, it's part of our real estate holdings," I mentioned casually, as if I just remembered. Bob and Julie both asked in unison, "What do you mean by our real estate?" "That building is rented by my father for his most prestigious office. I don't know if your company is involved in real estate, but it's not a shabby building," I explained calmly. Both seemed skeptical of my words. I hesitated for a moment, but there was no turning back now. Telling Bob about my company wasn't my concern anymore. "Yes, I know how grand it is. I was there when my father bought that building. It was about $200 million, I think. But recently, Dad was complaining about a tenant not paying their rent. Turns out it was your company. In fact, my father is a real estate magnate with assets worth $3.2 billion. The building Johnson Enterprises is in is one of them. The tenants of the building change regularly, but currently it's Johnson Enterprises. For the past few months, they hadn't paid their rent, and that's what was troubling my father. Rent not paid." Julie looked shocked, but then she burst out laughing. "That can't be true. Our company's doing great. We can surely pay the rent." I'm not falling for such a lame lie to drive a wedge between Bob and me. Her shrill voice echoed in my ears. I let out a deep sigh. It seemed like a reasonable conversation with this woman was impossible. Pulling out my smartphone right there, I decided to call my dad. Dad, I'm here with the daughter of Johnson Enterprises. Can you send me a photo of the reminder notice for the rent? I quickly relayed my request, and Dad sent a photo of the rent reminder notice for Johnson Enterprises. Showing it to Bob and Julie, I doubted they could suspect it was fake, given the speed. See, you can tell, right? 3 months of unpaid rent. If you don't pay soon, we might have to sue. What are you going to do? At the mention of a lawsuit, Bob and Julie's faces turned pale. Come to think of it, Dad has been really on edge lately, yelling about sales and firing a lot of employees. Julie mumbled, sounding unsure. Seeing her, Bob shouted in despair, Lies. You're just trying to trick us and tear Julie and me apart, aren't you? You're still that kind of person, trying to get back at me for remarrying. Your tactics are dirty. Startled by Bob's loud voice, I took a step back, hearing Bob's accusations of dirty tactics. Memories of all the heartless words he had hurled at me during our marriage flooded back. Determined to confront Bob, who was now gloating about marrying Julie, a wealthy businessman's daughter, I prepared myself to tell him the truth. What are you even saying? Do you really think I still have feelings for you? How foolish. I've long been fed up with a man like you. In fact, I've been feeling sorry for Julie, who got caught up with you. Did you marry her just for her money? You married me for shallow reasons too, like wanting to get married quickly or wanting kids. And who was it that left me when he found out we couldn't have kids? Who insulted me, calling me useless for being infertile? You're to blame for all of it, yet you think I still like you. You must be out of your mind. I unleashed my pent-up frustrations on Bob, feeling a wave of relief. Bob, on the other hand, seemed infuriated, trembling with anger. You're just an arrogant old hag. You probably can't even get married or have kids anymore. Julie and I were planning to have fun making a baby after this trip, and now you're accusing Johnson Enterprises of not paying rent. Panicked upon realizing the poor performance of Johnson Enterprises, Bob was desperate to blame all his misfortunes on me, deciding to deliver the final blow. I calmly said, "Oh, I didn't mention it, but I'm 4 months pregnant. I'm in the stable phase of my pregnancy, so Dad suggested I take this trip to relax. Of course, I have my doctor's permission." That's right. After divorcing Bob, I had found a new love. My boss at work and a subordinate of my father. He supported me mentally when I was struggling, encouraged me at work, and fully supported me. I found out I was pregnant with his child just 3 months ago. Knowing about the baby, I immediately married him. It was a quick marriage, but the company celebrated it grandly. My pregnancy was going smoothly, and encouraged by my father and husband, I embarked on this trip. And just before breaking up with Bob, my father had told me he was retiring as CEO next month. He decided to retire after being diagnosed with diabetes and thinking it was time to step down. Therefore, I would inherit my father's assets. This made it easier for me to accept the divorce from Bob. Even without Bob, I knew I could live a full life. The word pregnant slipped effortlessly from my lips, leaving Bob shouting, "What? You're pregnant? So, were you using birth control when we were married? What's going on?" Bob stomped his feet in complete confusion. Birth control? I never did that. Remember, I told you I had infertility tests at the clinic, and they found no issues. So the problem was with you. Too bad. As I bluntly told this to Bob, his face twisted visibly. The problem was with me? Does that mean Julie and I can't have kids? Why did I divorce you and marry Julie? Bob muttered to himself, shoulders slumped in defeat. What do you mean, why? I felt betrayed, knowing he was infertile. Julie snapped, angry at Bob's selfish reasoning. Realizing I couldn't bother with them anymore, I said my final words. That's why from now on, please don't involve yourself with me and Julie. Regarding the rent for Johnson Enterprises, I won't back down until it's fully paid. If you plan to continue renting that building, please pay the overdue rent soon. Otherwise, we'll have to take legal action. I have nothing more to save you two, so goodbye. I left Bob and Julie arguing and confidently walked back to my hotel room. After returning from my trip, my husband greeted me with a smile, saying, "Welcome back. Sorry I couldn't help around the house. Was everything okay?" "Of course, it was fine. I'm glad you got to relax, Amy." "Thank you." My husband smiled warmly at me, and I felt a great sense of relief. Since marrying my current husband, I've been reassured every day, completely forgetting about Bob. Since that trip, I haven't met Bob. The following is what I heard through my father's contacts. After that incident, Bob and Julie's fights became incessant. Despite thinking he was marrying into wealth, Bob discovered Johnson Enterprises was in deep debt. Coincidentally, news was all over TV about a Johnson Enterprises employee embezzling millions of dollars from clients. Julie's father knew about the fraud, but tried to cover it up for the company's reputation. However, once the scandal became public, Johnson Enterprises' stock plummeted, having lost its credibility. The company saw a mass exodus of employees. In such a state, they couldn't possibly pay the rent. So my father was taking legal action against Johnson Enterprises. The future of the company looked bleak, entirely Johnson Enterprises' fault. Bob, having lost a fortune he thought was within his grasp, was furiously blaming everyone but himself. Thinking he could ride on the coattails of wealth was overly optimistic of Bob. Julie, realizing Bob was infertile, accused him of marriage fraud. Furthermore, after our hotel encounter, I had a lawyer demand compensation from Bob for his infidelity, leaving both him and Julie in debt. I heard that Bob and Julie ended up arguing every time they saw each other, and they finally got divorced recently. Then, unbelievably, Bob called me after divorcing Julie. "Amy, please marry me again. I have debts." Other than the alimony, Julie made me buy everything she wanted and then left without paying a dime. "You're the only one I can rely on. I'll do anything for you. Please forgive me." Bob's pleas, sounding like a beggar, were so pitiful that they almost made me sick. His unchanged attitude of marrying for money was just appalling. "No, I have no desire to be involved with you ever again. I'm going to be happy with my husband and our child, so please don't contact me again. Goodbye," I said calmly, and then immediately set his phone number to be blocked. That should stop any more absurd calls from Bob. Having lost his wife and money, Bob will likely live a lonely life now. Given his infertility, remarriage might be difficult for him. Moreover, it's hard to imagine someone falling for a person like Bob who mocks others so readily. All I could think was that he should at least try to repay his debts. I thought about it as if it were someone else's problem. As for me, I'm looking forward to my life with my husband and our soon-to-arrive baby. Both my work and personal life are more fulfilling than ever, and I'm savoring this unparalleled happiness.